Advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and we're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. It is Friday. We had a very busy week, and at some point we're going to recap some of the different things that went on during the week, but thrilled to be here with you. We're going to be here live for the next 3 hours talking about topics having to do with autism and being the most effective, efficient member of a team working with a child on the autism spectrum. Whether you're a parent, a teacher, or a practitioner, I know that that's important to you. I know it's important to me. And it's hard. It's a balancing act. You know, I've been thinking about it a lot this week and how life, you know, there's our autism track, right? And there's the life track, and they have to intertwine. And boy, sometimes it's just hard. And we have to take these things as they come and negotiate our way through. There's a lot to talk about how do we help our kids? How do we help ourselves? How do we manage the stress? How do we negotiate this financial mess that we will be in when we have a child on the autism spectrum? Because I don't think that anyone... Well, we talk all the time about how Holly Robinson Peete wrote a blog last year. It was about the 8 things that she wished the world knew about autism, and the first one was that nobody can afford it. Nobody can afford it. So that includes all of us. So negotiating just the financial aspect, but there's the emotional component of it too. What's it like to have a child diagnosed with autism? And then what's it like to put a lot of other things, maybe not everything, but a lot of other things on hold to be able to do the intervention that you need to do to be able to help your child reach their full potential. Here's the good news, that there's the whole puzzle piece of autism. There are a whole lot of things that we don't know about autism. There are a whole lot of things that we're still finding out. And of course, part of the good news is that there are brilliant minds working on that. I know that that's hard to accept, but they are. Different areas of it, because it's a huge, huge conundrum, right? But in amongst all that stuff that we don't know, there's a lot that we do know today. And one of the things that we know today is that we can make substantive progress with every single child who is on the spectrum. Greatly, profoundly affected, only mildly affected, no matter what age they are. Yes, I said it, I meant it. We can make progress with all of those kids if we are using quality ABA in the right amount over the right amount of time. This is not a magic pill. This is not something you take once and go, wow, so glad we did that. Whew, now we can sit back and relax. I wish I could tell you that that was the case, but it isn't. ABA and a behavioral intervention is something that takes a great deal of time, an investment of time and energy and patience. And it takes more than one person. And you know, it's exhausting. Mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, it's exhausting. But you know what? Here's the really spectacular news. It creates progress with all of our kids. And in some cases, it creates wild, wonderful progress to the point where the kids are virtually indistinguishable from their peers. In other cases, it creates incredible progress so that they can lead largely a life that is unencumbered by things having to do with autism. And in other cases, it will help them to reach their full potential where they are a substantive part of the community with support. So that's pretty exciting. And for that reason, we will talk about ABA a lot here in the tools that we all need to learn, because they're great tools, but you have to be creative with them and you have to be able to apply them in a lot of different situations. We talk about generalization with our kids, how you teach them something and then they have to be able to apply it in a wide setting in order for it to really be their skill. Well, that's kind of the deal with us for ABA. So we do talk about all those things, but we talk about the emotional side too, and we talk about the financial side, and we talk about the stress side of it, and finding the way to conduct your life while you're doing it. It is not easy. I always like to remind you that ABA is the only scientifically proven effective treatment for autism, and that's part of the reason why we talk about it. I am not an expert in ABA. I am a parent. My son was diagnosed when he was 2.5. He's now 9. And so I know what it's like to have gone through a really intensive ABA program, a quality program. That doesn't mean that my journey is in any way similar to yours, because we all start in different places at different times with different children who have different skill levels, right? So please don't think that I'm not an expert in anything. Let's say that. I always like to remind you, what I don't know is endless and boundless. But what I do know for sure is that there's hope and that there's help and that there are some brilliant people who are working to help you and want to give you information. We have those people come into the studio from time to time, and I have access to them in a larger scale on your behalf. And that's really, please know that I totally get it, it's not like I just got granted access to all these people. When I was on the journey, I didn't have access to all these people. But I now have access to them on your behalf. And to me, that's a sacred trust. And I want to ask them the things that are going to help you. But please don't expect that I'm going to know which questions you want me to ask. I might hit it right sometimes, having been on this journey, but I'm going to miss things, right? You can all accept that. There are parts of your journey that I don't even know about, because our kids are different. You live someplace different. You have different constraints than what I have. And you have different things that you worry about. So don't make me guess, is what I was saying. Take advantage of this opportunity and put me to work for you. Have me be your autism assistant, right? I'm sure you could use an assistant, right? You're the project manager. Have me be your assistant. Give me something to do. Say, Shannon, I need you to chase down the answer to this for me, and I will do that for you. Isn't that a lovely thing? And it doesn't cost you anything. I'm like an unpaid intern for you. Your unpaid intern autism assistant. How about that? And there are lots of different ways that you can get a hold of me to ask me to do something. So let's talk about what some of those different ways are. If you're watching us right now on autism-live.com, then you'll see on the top of your screen on that sort of, I'm trying to think, on your right-hand side. Yeah, I have trouble with right and left. On your right-hand side, it says, Shannon is answering right now. And below that, when it says that, there's a little box below it that says questions, right? And you can type in there. It's active right now. I hit my active button, and you can type in there. You don't have to log in. You don't have to give us information. You don't have to do anything except type and hit enter, and it appears magically here before me, and you and I can interact, and I can chase down information for you. So that's a great thing. If you're watching on Autism-Live and it says rebroadcast, because we only do 3 hours live a day, Monday through Friday, and occasionally I take days off because I have a child, and it's important that I do things with him, and sometimes have IEP meetings, and just like you. And so I'm not always here, but when I'm not here, we're always playing some show from our recent past, right? So you will see that a lot of times it will say rebroadcast. So when it says rebroadcast, that question box is not active, but you can ask questions via email. Whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world, email is always open, right? Don't you love that about the internet? Never closes. Send us your email. We're going to cycle through some of the different ways that you can get a hold of us. There it is. And you can send the email. We will address it on the next live show, and we will send you a typewritten response, sometimes a link to when we talked about it on the show so that you can watch it and see for yourself what it was that how we answered it and who we went to. Sometimes the email that comes back is from me, sometimes it's from somebody on the staff, sometimes it's from the expert that we've referred you to. I do beg your patience because when we refer things out to an expert, sometimes it takes them a couple of days to be able to respond because they're busy. But again, it's free. So that's a lovely, lovely thing. And there is no question that you can't ask. There are questions we don't have answers to, but we'll tell you. We're keeping it real here, right? All right, so email is one of the ways you can get a hold of us, but there are so many other ways as well. You can phone us. You can actually even phone into the studio. If you want to talk to me right now, you can call that number. They'll patch you into the studio and you and I can have a conversation. Sometimes that's all you need, right, is somebody to listen and somebody to say, wow, you're going through a lot. And you know what? You're doing a good job. You're doing the best you can. So if you want to chat, I have my herbal tea here. We can sit and chat on the phone. I love to talk on the phone. You can also Skype in with us too. So if you have a computer with a camera and you like the way you look today, or you're fine with the way you look today, we can be talking with picture and sound. And if you don't like the way you look today, you don't have to activate your camera. And if you're like me and have a laptop that doesn't have a camera, it's okay. We can do audio only on Skype, but it's a great way for you wherever you are in the world. We are able to Skype internationally. It's very fun. We do a lot of interviews via Skype and have this week, in fact. All right, so there's those ways, but you can also get a hold of us via Facebook. We have a new Facebook page, Autism Live, on Facebook. You can go there, like the page. We have a lot of clips on there and information. The question of the day is always on our Facebook page. I love to watch you guys interact with each other. It's really, I think, one of the more gratifying things, because when I see somebody write something like, I'm having a tough time, and I see the rest of you step up and say, you know what, you're going to be okay. I just love that. It's a very sweet thing for me. You guys take care of each other. That's always what I've seen in the autism community. Yeah, we may not all agree on everything, right? But we help to lift each other up, which is important to be able to do. You can also tweet with us. We love it when you interact with us on Twitter. We are Autism Live Show on Twitter, and we appreciate being able to interact with you in that way. Okay, now I mentioned that there are other ways besides Autism-Live to watch the show, and this has come about really because of some of the stuff that you guys have written into us and said, here's what we want. And a couple of parents wrote in and said, we really enjoy the show, but we want a library we want to go back and look at an episode from 2 weeks ago. I want to be able to pause it. I want to fast forward, rewind. You said something and I want to hear it again. We are such a DVR world, aren't we? And so we found a lot of different ways in which you can do that. One of them is blip.tv. So you can be checking us out there, watch the whole library of shows, put in keywords. You want to know about toilet training, you can put that in there and find all of the episodes that we've talked about toilet training. Really, really handy. We also have our own YouTube channel, so check us out there. We love it when you guys watch us on YouTube and share. If you see something that you like on YouTube and you can share it on your Facebook, boy, we love that. And because we're just trying to get the word out that there's help and there's hope, give people information. So spread it around. And you can also download us for free on iTunes. Free download. That's picture and sound. You can archive the episodes, again, fast forward, rewind, whatever you need to do to get the information that you want. And we are also on Ustream. So all of those different places. But by the way, if there's a place that you're aware of that you don't see us listed, would you do us a favor and let us know? Because as I said, I can't possibly know everything. And we want to be able to serve you. So let us know if there's some way that we can do that, right? Okay, we like to start every morning with something that we fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. This is the time of day when we take apart those terms that frustrate us all out the door and around the corner and down the block, right? people, we go to meetings, we go to a webinar, we go to a seminar, and there are experts talking about autism, and they're using a bunch of words, or even we just go to our child's school, and the teachers and the principal and the specialists that are there start using these interchangeable, I call it alphabet land. They use these terms, and you go, slow down. I have no idea what you're saying. And can I tell you, I'm a former teacher. So a lot of the terms that were education speak, I was at least familiar with to a certain extent, and I've been on this journey now for 7 years, and I recently had an interchange with my son's OT, his occupational therapist, and I was talking about getting him, it was his triannual IEP. I know, and I'm doing it now, right? I'm going to catch up with some of those terms. But I was having an interchange with the OT, and he sent me back an email, and there were at least 5 jargon terms in it that I had no idea. I was like, I'm sorry, I don't know what that is. And he said, oh, I just, because you're one of the moms who's been around for a while. I know you host a show. I just figured you have. No, I don't know all these terms. You can't, I don't think we ever get to the point where you know them all. I see that the BCBAs, the Board Certified Behavior Analysts, they know the ABA terms. But then when you start to talk about some of the education speak alphabet terms, they go, okay, I don't know. What are you talking about? And the same thing with the teachers. They don't know the ABA terms. Some of the terms, because you can't know it all, is my point. You can't. But we're in the middle of all this, right? We have to know some of the ABA terms. We have to know some of the edu-speak terms. We have to know the OT terms. We have to know the SLP, the speech and language pathologist. You could go crazy, right? It is crazy making. But if we quiet all the noise and say, what's going to make me the most efficient, most effective person that I can be as a team member, then certainly we arrive at the idea of making friends with at least the jargon that we're going to hear and use the most, right? I don't mind going into a meeting and saying twice, tell me what that means, right? Because I think that that's a sign of I'm curious, I want to understand, and it doesn't slow me up too much if I ask you twice. But if I have to ask 32 times in an hour meeting, what are you talking about? I'm not going to get what I wanted out of that meeting. I'm going to wish that I had a translator, right? So we make friends little by little with these terms, one word, one phrase, one anagram at a time. And eventually what we see over time is that somebody can go on a run of jargon and we understand most of it. It's like learning a foreign language. It really is. And I don't know about you, but it wasn't one I counted on. This wasn't on my list of things to do, right? I had stuff that I wanted. This wasn't on my bucket list, learning this jargon. But it is now, albeit with some resentment, right? Because I need to for my child. I need to so that I understand what they're saying. They're talking about my child. And I want to understand, what are you talking about? I want to be able to make informed decisions. And so that means I have to understand what they're saying. And I know that to some extent, even though you're overwhelmed with it, that you feel the same way. So let's do one thing at a time. And I used a bunch of terms in there. I said we'd come back and talk about them. And our term today is IEP. And I mentioned that my son was having his triannual IEP. Okay, let's talk about what this is. An IEP is an individualized education program or plan. Sometimes people use program, sometimes they use plan. If your child has a documented disability, and we're going to talk about disability later on, then they are entitled to an IEP. And this is a good thing because it says that your child is allowed to have accommodation, that the expectation is not that they're going to be able to go into the classroom and do everything that the other kids can without some help. And that, because the whole purpose of school, right? They talk about accessing the curriculum. There are state standards and there are government standards of, in second grade, this is what a second grader should know, right? Yeah, not all second graders do, and they're not all on the spectrum, right? But in the United States, there is a legal responsibility that the teacher has and that the school has and that the community has, that they have to be able to give that child access to that curriculum and help them to be able to understand. That's not assuming that they all will, but to help them to be able to understand. Well, we talk all the time about kids learn in different ways, right? And really, if you want to get down to it, wouldn't it be nice if everybody could have an individualized education plan? But that isn't the case. But for a child who has a documented disability, and there are several different headings that can come under, they are then entitled to an IEP. And what happens is there's an IEP team that sits down together at least every 3 years. There is a legal response. That's why we say triannual. At the very least, they have to sit down every 3 years. For a lot of kids, in a lot of cases, the team will sit down every year, and sometimes even more frequently than that if the parent or someone on the team asks for it. But there is a legal responsibility that every 3 years the child needs to be evaluated and looked at to see how are we doing, where are we going, and the team has to meet at least triannually. And usually that triannual meeting is bigger because people need to assess. They test your child to see, where are we? Do we still need this? How much do we need this? Do we need more? Do we need less? What are we doing? Is it effective, what we're doing? That's not a bad thing, but it's a stressful thing. Okay, so individualized education plan, a federally mandated legal document, because what ends up happening, that team meets and they come up with this document that's legally binding that details education goals for the specific child within the special education scope. So it may be, there's so many different circumstances. Let me go ahead to our working definition, which is a written plan to educate a child with special needs that must be followed. That's our working definition. So how many times have you been in a situation or heard of a situation where a child goes to preschool or goes to kindergarten and your child has a different set of circumstances that they're working on? They have sensory issues. They have an inability to, I think about for my child when we go to Disneyland and we ask for a special guest pass and they say to us, why do you need this? Well, because my son struggles with sensory overload, and if on top of that he's having to stand in a small crowded place and be bombarded by sensory stuff, he is going to melt down faster than your typical child. I think that all children melt down at some point with that, right? But my son's going to melt down faster, and his meltdown is going to be harder than it is for, the toddler that's just melting down because. So I want special accommodation for my son so that we don't get to that point, because he can't appreciate Disneyland in its full entirety if he's going to be melting down every time we stand in line for a ride. Well, kind of the same thing with education. If we know that a child is having difficulty because they've got sensory stuff going on and they're needing to rock and whatever, it may be that in a classroom a child without a diagnosis would be told, hey, you can't do that. It's not allowed. But if this child needs to be able to do certain things in order to be able to get to the work, we're going to accommodate it, right? To some extent, some things. There are exceptions, right? It has to be something that doesn't prevent other people next to them being able to access the curriculum, or we start to talk about a different placement. Am I going too fast? Imagine that your child has, let's take my own child, that he likes to make noises. That's something that he does that helps him. That's one of his repetitive things that he does that's self-stimulatory. He makes very high-pitched noises. Well, if my son had continued to continually make high-pitched noises, his placement in a completely included classroom could have been at risk, because if the child sitting next to him is having a hard time concentrating because my son is making R2-D2 noises, we can't have that, right? So it's not a carte blanche. And I think that a lot of people think that an IEP is a carte blanche. It's not. But what it does say is that this child should not be discriminated against because they have different things going on. Imagine the child who, for whatever reason, is in a wheelchair, right, and does not have the use of their legs. We don't say to that child, well, too bad, you can't get into the classroom because there's steps. They build a platform so that the child is able to get in the classroom to access the curriculum. And when the child goes to physical education, there is an understanding that they're not going to be able to run with the other kids, but that doesn't invalidate that they need to get physical education. In fact, they probably need it more because they've got to be able to learn to use the rest of their muscles to compensate for the fact that they don't have legs that are functional. So they adapt the program to be able to fit this individual child's needs. It doesn't mean that they are not learning a lot of the same things, but they're adapting the program. Same thing with our kids. In an IEP, it's going to list the child's goals. I think it's really key that we as parents understand what the goals are that they put down. They will put language in it that says, this is what the goal is, that by this and so date, in 3 out of 5 trials, the child will be able to do this, that the person teaching it is, whoever that person is, whether it's the teacher or a special day teacher or a resource teacher, that they're going to be able to do it in this setting, and they'll say whether it's a completely included classroom or the resource room or the special day class, wherever it is, and that's how we're going to measure that the child is getting it done. They'll list special accommodations. In some cases, they will list, how they're going to go about it, although not usually. But it's sort of that goal, it is the goal that they want the child to reach. And they have a legal responsibility to be teaching that skill or lesson or whatever it is to the child. So, and you need to get regular reports on it, that the child is meeting the goal, is not meeting the goal, so on and so forth. So important that that document say things that you really want your child to work on. Case in point, I go back to my child. The first time we went to an IEP was when he was in third grade, when he was 3 years old, excuse me. And usually that's, if your child already has a diagnosis, that's the period of time when you will start having IEPs, is at 3 years old. They're not even in school yet, but they're going to have an IEP. And the school will offer you something that's called FAPE, Free Appropriate Public Education after the age of 3. And so they detail, here is what we were offering, so there'll be an hour of speech, there'll be 2 hours of OT, there'll be an hour of APE, I should be explaining all these terms, OT, occupational therapy, APE, adaptive physical education, whatever it is that they're offering, and a placement. And then there are the individual goals. And for my son, when he was 3, there was some stuff that he could do. For instance, if somebody sat there with him and they had red bears and yellow bears and blue bears, and they had 3 cups, and they would say to him, sort them out. He didn't understand receptively what sort them out was, but if somebody took and put a red bear in one cup and a yellow bear in another cup and a blue bear in another cup and then slid the cups towards my son, he knew, and obviously he didn't know it the first time, but he knew I'm supposed to put all the red bears here, all the blue bears here, and all the yellow bears. He totally got that and could do that like a champ. Just, that's what you want me to do? Great. And he would do that. And there were a couple other skills that he had too. I don't know that he necessarily understood, but he could do it. And one of the goals that they had on his IEP was that by the end of the year, he would be able to do that. And I said, why is this a goal on his IEP? He can already do that. Yeah, but he can't do it in a room full of a classroom full of kids, which was the God's honest truth. He could do it at home in his high chair when it was just him, and he could sort them out. But if you put him in a classroom full of kids, he just screamed. It was such sensory overload for him. He would just scream his head off and cry and crawl towards the door and bite you if he had to. He wanted out. And so the school was saying, well, we're going to only teach him the things that he already, and there were a bunch of goals that were like this, and I was going through them, he can do that. Why are we teaching him things he can already do? And they were saying, because we need for him to be able to do it in all settings. Now, it's not unreasonable, right? And I want to be clear about that, that a child needs to be able to do things in different settings with different sensory issues. But for me personally, as a parent for that year, which I thought was so crucial, those were not the right goals for me. It's just a way of looking at it, but I said, this is so crucial that we get him caught up. Let's continue to work at home and not bombard him with sensory issues, because I feel like if he learns more and gets functional communication and starts to understand what's happening, then the sensory stuff is going to get better as a result of that. It's an ideological difference of opinion, but it was my opinion as a parent that that's the direction that we needed to go. School did not agree and said, let's just, status quo. If we get to it, we'll teach more, but we're only going to be responsible for this. And eventually, we made our own decision. We stayed home. I mentioned this yesterday. He had intensive ABA at home so that a year later, my son qualified to be included in the completely neurotypical classroom. I have no doubt that the choice we made was the right one. So I really want to encourage parents to look at the goals that they're teaching. A lot of times parents skim over that and go, oh, well, they must know best, right? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. They've known your child for however many minutes, right? And not as much as you know your child. So take a look at those goals, compare them with what the state standards for, or the government standards, federal standards for where a child at that level should be, and make sure that it's something that you feel is substantive. By the way, we talked a little bit about the fact that attached to your IEP, there's a little place on the front of the IEP, you get this big document, and there's a box at the top that says Behavior Intervention Plan, or BIP is attached. You really want to see that box checked and have that attached, because when your behavior intervention plan is correct, and we had Dr. Adele Nadowski in here showing you Behavior Champ, and it helps you if you know the function of the behavior that they're involved in. We're going to talk more about this later on, but it's the plan, it's the roadmap for what do we do when this child behaves in certain ways. You really want that there. We've seen time and time again, especially in the last year in the media, these situations where the child is engaging in what we understand to be pretty run-of-the-mill expected behavior, right? That's challenging, honestly challenging, but teachers and substitute teachers and staff dealing with it in a way that is just not appropriate, even a little, right? That you literally look at it and go, what were they thinking? Clearly they're not trained properly, right? Well, that could all be eliminated. Not all. A lot of it could be eliminated if the proper BIP is attached, because that becomes part of a legal document. And if the child, I think of the circumstance of the child who liked to touch other kids' ears. It just was one of his repetitive and restrictive behaviors that he perseverated on it and wanted to touch other kids' ears. And the regular day classroom, the teacher had a way, an intervention of dealing with it, but she was out one day and there was a substitute teacher, and the child started touching other ears, so the substitute teacher felt that the appropriate response was to go over and pinch his ears and say, well, how do you like that? It's not so nice when people do it to you, is it? And pinched the child's ears so much that she bruised them over the course of a day. And I don't know that there wasn't a BIP attached and that this person just didn't read it, which is possible. But I do know that if there were a BIP attached, there would at least be the hope that the teacher, and you can say to your teacher, if you're not here, I need for you to have somebody who can carry out the BIP, or other staff to come in who can make sure that the BIP is followed to the letter, because it's now part of the legal document and they're legally responsible for it. So BIP attached to the IEP. I know, it's overwhelming, right? BIP, Behavior Intervention Plan. So the IEP, the Individualized Education Plan, the BIP, the Behavior Intervention Plan, stapled together, legal document, lovely. And let me just tell you, when you say to a school, I think you're in violation, they hear that. because they know that's a nightmare for them. So they want to comply with the legal document. All right, we always have a question of the day. Question of the day meant to get you thinking, participating. We love it when you answer it on Facebook. Our question today is, what do you wish you could change about your circumstances? Remember that yesterday it was, what do you wish you could change about yourself? And we answered that. But what do you wish you could change about your circumstances? Do you wish, that you were living someplace else? Is your home environment not what you wish it was? What do I'm going to guess that some of you are going to write in that your bank account is not what you wish. But what do you wish you could change about your circumstances? Because it's not always possible to change your circumstances, but sometimes it is. And it's, I certainly have seen this in my life, that there are a whole lot of people that have made decisions and said, look, this is what I'm focusing on, and this is the way this is going to happen. I've seen people that moved to other states so that they had access to ABA and that they had access to families so that they could have a support system. There are definitely things about our circumstances that we changed, my husband and I, when we saw, okay, this isn't going to work for right now, so we need to do something different. And even now, there are things that I talk all the time about how my husband and I have our manifesto, like what's important. And we like to touch base with each other and say, is there something we need to tweak here? Is there something we need to change? And we had the conversation the other day. I said, we are finally at a point, and can I tell you how hard one it is and how grateful I am that we had the things that we did so we could be where we are. And I said to him, I just know that someday we are going to look back at this time, and our son is just right on that cusp of, he's still, he's not a little boy anymore, but he still has a lot of little boy in him, but he's not a teenager yet for like the next 7 seconds. And I just know that there's going to be a time when we look back and say how simplistic this time was. And as tough as it is, how simplistic it is. And I said, I really want to enjoy this more. I want for us to slow some other things down and edit some things, and even some people, where we can focus a little bit more on how wonderful these days are. And we have been so used to being on this treadmill of, which therapist is at the door and what appointment do we have? And we've been a full year now without that intensive ABA in the home. And I think we're just now starting to make some sense of, okay, this is what life looks like after autism. We're not done with autism. I don't mean to make it sound like that, but we're not in the hardcore autism anymore. And I want to appreciate it. And so we're looking at different ways that we can streamline and reduce stress and enjoy it more. And that's a big one for me. And I mentioned yesterday that I need to get some more energy because I'm too tired to enjoy it now. I go home and I'm, so really important to look at, what would you change? Because a lot of times you can. Sometimes you can't. But even then, to look at things and go, okay, all right, this I can't change, and part of it is because I'm choosing to do this other thing, which I continue to choose. And I think there's some peace of mind in that. All right, our topic for the day, as it has been for the entire week, is ABA for beginners. And there are a lot of different things that we are going to be talking about today that we're going to try to put through that filter of ABA for beginners. Some of the different things that we're going to talk about. We have an academic tip for you coming up, a social tip. And it says on here, research with Dr. Jonathan Tarbucks. I have to tell you that we received word this morning that we're not going to be joined by Dr. Jonathan Tarbucks today. I apologize, as does he, but some stuff has come up for him where he has been called away, stuff that's important, and we will have him hopefully with us next week. But it does give us an opportunity to talk about some different things. We're going to show you some more ABAI interviews, these experts who've got some great information, and we're going to talk a little bit about challenging behavior through the guise of beginning ABA. What kinds of tools can you use if you're new to ABA to be able to change some of the stuff that's happening in your home that's really, really giving you a hard time? So all of that we're going to do today and more. So stick with us. We're going to take a break and be back after these messages. Currently, in the United States, 1 in 88 children is affected by autism. 1 in 88 means something different when your child is the one. Recovery is possible. Hi, I'm Shannon Penrod, host of Autism Live, an online show about autism broadcast by CARD, the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. I'm also the mother of a child with autism, my beautiful son, Jem. You know our old joke, guess what?
Chicken butt.
Chicken butt. So we're gonna take the chickens. But things weren't always so easy. I remember when Jem was first diagnosed with autism. I used to lay awake at night in bed and pray for someone or something that could help us to get our child back. My prayers were answered by Dr. Doreen Grandpichet and the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. CARD treats autism and other related disorders using the principles of ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, which is the only scientifically proven effective treatment for autism. It is also recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics and the U.S. Surgeon General. About a year after we started treatment with CARD, we were able to see tremendous improvement, and we got our child back.
What grade are you in?
Second.
You are a smart cookie, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Do you like school?
Yeah.
Do you have any good friends?
Yeah. Oscar.
Oscar is your best friend?
Yeah.
And my child is just one of thousands to benefit from CARD ABA therapy. Across the nation and around the world, children are making amazing progress and being given the keys to unlock their full potential.
We are extremely grateful for the amazing job CARD has done in helping our daughter. Our daughter today, just in 4 months, I think is a totally different child than when she started with CARD. I kind of see it as, it seems like her brain in a way was asleep, and now that we've gotten so many services, we've seen her wake up.
Teacher has some glasses.
Recovery is possible if you take the right steps, if you're willing to put in all the hard work. And 7.5 years, yeah, it's a lot of work. It's worth every little bit, and CARD's been there with us every step of the way.
I have 2 children with autism. I can't imagine a day without CARD or the therapists. They've been so instrumental in helping us with our kids and shaping their lives and helping us help them.
Thank you, Christina Big Alex.
Thank you, Jackie and Mariana.
We've tried other things before ABA, but the most beneficial thing has been ABA services, and I'd be the first person to tell any newly diagnosed family that you have to contact an ABA provider, and if you're lucky enough to have CARD, you're very blessed.
Recovery from autism is absolutely a possibility. We've been recovering children for over 20 years. It's just a matter of identifying the child's medical needs, understanding the child's sensory issues, and then teaching the child all of the skills they need in order to function normally.
We know there's hope for autism. Autism is treatable, and recovery from autism is possible. Welcome back to Autism Live. We are webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. It's Friday, I know. And I say that because I'm now on a Monday through Friday schedule, but I know that not everybody else is, and my husband isn't. So Friday is different things to different people, right? But everything does change for people on Friday because different businesses are open, and I know for some of you that's a frustration. Can I tell you that when my son had just been, well, when he was getting diagnosed and we were trying to get services, we hadn't even been diagnosed at that point, and getting into an office that was a Monday through Friday that dealt with holidays, it was the single most frustrating time of my life. And I would call and say, hi, I'm supposed to speak to so-and-so, and they would say, oh, you know what? And I called on the first day of November, and they said, oh, you know, Shirley, I don't know that her name was Shirley, but Shirley is out on vacation because she went back east, and she's going to be there through Thanksgiving. What, are you kidding me? So I, I tried to do what I could do and waited till Shirley, I don't know what her name was, came back from Thanksgiving. And Shirley had to move the piece of paper from this part of her desk to this part of her desk. It took her 7 seconds to do what she had to do. And then it went to another person's desk, and I had to call that person and say, so what? Oh, we're sorry. She's not in because she's out for Hanukkah. And I was like, okay, all right, I'll wait through that. And then she came back from Hanukkah and moved her piece of paper to another part of the desk. And now the next person, and it was just like the worst timing on the face of the earth, as it is for all people all the time, I swear. And then I had to call that person. Oh, she's out for Christmas. Are you kidding me? And then finally, we're back from Christmas. Oh, that person's off for New Year's. Oh, and by the time we got to Martin Luther King birthday, I said, you know what? I'm just going to come down there. How about if I come down with my son and I'll just sit there. We're going to bring sleeping bags and we'll stay until you guys can process the papers. It's okay. I know you all have holidays. We'll just chain ourselves to the front door and we'll see how much we can accomplish. And oddly enough, the paperwork went through and we were able to start services, I think on the 21st of January, because I'd had it. I just had it. So I know for all of you, the Friday thing is sometimes just a frustration, but for some of you, it is a happy, happy thing. And for me today, it's a happy, happy thing because I get to spend more time with my child. I love being here, don't get me wrong, but I love to spend time with my child just that much more. Sorry, he wins. In any case, for some of us, we're getting ready to go back to school. I don't know how the time has gone so fast, but for my son, he goes back 2 weeks from yesterday. So, just creeping up on us. And we always like to give you an academic skill tip of the week. And there are lots of different things that we can do to get our kids ready for school. And we've been talking about some of the things like getting the backpack and, driving, if it's a new school or the first time going to school, driving over to the school every day, getting them into the routine of, if they're doing centers, we've talked about some of those different things. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the actual skills that a child needs to have to succeed in school, which we're probably going to be talking about the younger end of kids at this point, because I told you guys I use the skills curriculum, love the skills curriculum. And in the academic skills portion of the skills curriculum, it really covers those core, really foundational skills that you'll see in the rest of skills. It covers up the skills that a child needs to know up through the age of 9. Well, this is the one exception, that the academic skills currently, I know there's a plan to expand it later on, only covers those core skills that go up through the end of first grade. And you might think to yourself, well, why is that? Because I will tell you, there are so many things in those core skills that set children up for success for the rest of their lives. And you know what it's like if you're going to take the time to build a building, you have to spend the most time on the foundation. Otherwise, it's not, you're going to build this tower that's not going to make it, right? And I like to talk about the whole thing of, teachers teaching Swiss cheese. And because this is really what, at least here in the United States, as a former teacher, this is what I see, that, you get a child, and I only taught the upper grades, and mostly, most of my teaching experiences in college, still Swiss cheese, but that I did spend some time in junior high and in high school, and you have this a child, and you have upwards of 30 kids in the classroom, and each one of them is an individual piece of Swiss cheese, that they have some skills, but there are huge holes, and it's frustrating, right? Because you don't know, this one's holes are here, here, and here, and the other ones are here, here, and here. They're all different. But what you discover is that sometimes that core isn't there. All these studies have shown how important it is for children to go to preschool, that they do that much better in kindergarten, and that they'll do that much better in school. And, I don't think it's any big shock to anybody, because you get those core foundations and you give the child more opportunity to get those core skills. So this is what, and I want to reiterate that in the skills program, it's the curriculum that's there is not meant to take the place of kindergarten and preschool, kindergarten, and first grade at all. It is not a curriculum that you can go from A to Z and say, good, we got it done. It is meant to be a companion piece to the curriculum that's happening for kids who are struggling to learn to be able to have more opportunities and in some different ways to get some of those core skills that are so important moving on. Okay, and you'll see in the academic, if you work on skills at all, and I hope that you guys do. There's a free trial. Check it out. It's just fabulous. I use it now at home. But there's a math domain and there's a language arts domain. And in the math domain, one of the things that they have are lessons to teach about shapes. There's things about ordering and sequencing and patterning and the basics of learning the numbers, but also not just learning that, you know, the one is shaped like this, but that one represents one thing, that there's a correlation between this number and a quantity, and they learn the words of, you know, it's a few or it's several or it's many. So they're all these different, but one of the lessons is about shapes. And, you know, I can't reiterate enough that it's one of those duh things, that there are some kids that you can just hold something up and you can hold up a little piece of paper and you can say to them once and they love it. You know, you do it in the color that they love and you can hold it up and go, what shape is this? It's a square. And the kids go, it's a square, right? And they see it on the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse and Mickey Mouse walks through and says, look, let's look at all the squares. And that's all it takes for that child to learn a square. Well, that's wonderful. Isn't that? We celebrate that. Oh, that's just fabulous. They got it. But what about the kids that don't get it from that? What about, and I'm talking about kids that aren't even necessarily on the spectrum, but a child who you say, this is a square, and they go, okay, it's a square. And then they see the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, and Mickey walks around and says, let's look at all the things that are a square, and they look at that and go, okay, that's a square. And then you come back 2 days later, and you hold up a circle, and you say, what is it? And they go, it's a square. Or you hold up the square, and you say, what is it? I don't know, right? They just didn't get it in that way that some kids do. A lot of kids just don't pick it up that easily. So what do you do then? Do you just gloss over it and keep going? Well, in some cases, that is what happens to kids. But what we do when we do something in skills is we teach it through the principles of ABA. And principle number one that I talk about all the time, in order for any behavior to be maintained, it has to be reinforcing. So if we want a child to understand the difference between, and now I've folded it into a rectangle, but if we want the child to understand that this is a square and that this is a rectangle, we need to make it worth their while. And that's the long and the short of it, because we've already seen it's difficult for them. Not impossible. There's a difference, but it's difficult for them. So we need to make it reinforcing for them to be able to distinguish the square and the rectangle and the circle and the cone. And because eventually we're going to get to the point where, I mean, right now my son is learning the difference between a hexagon and a pentagon and a parallelogram and, you know, right about when he's going to lose me. In the conversation. I feel like I'm stuck on that show, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? I'm going to have problems, but I'm starting this year. But I already had problems when they did the patterning. I don't remember being in kindergarten and learning patterning. I just don't. I don't think they taught it in 1960, whatever, when I was there taking kindergarten. Maybe they did. I don't know. But in any case, we need to make it reinforcing enough for them. So we're going to use stimuli, at least in the beginning, that are really exciting to them. So in that case, you know, the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse and going around and looking at the squares with Mickey Mouse Clubhouse may be enough to do it for a child if they find Mickey Mouse reinforcing. If they don't, we got to find what, you know, is it Thomas the Tank that they find reinforcing? Are there different colors that they like? We're going to do it in different settings with different people so that we're working towards generalization. But we're going to teach shapes in lots of different ways, and we're going to teach it in very specific trials, give the child tons more opportunity than just a couple of times, right? So that the child is not only going to get it, they're going to want to get it. And that's really the long and the short of it. And we're going to track it and do data on it so that we see that the child really understands that this is a rectangle, whether it's in a piece of paper or we have a block or it's blue or it's orange, or if it's on TV, that they're going to be able to pick out different shapes. There are lots of apps now that we can work on these things with, but the key is that it's got to be reinforcing for the child. And you know, for my son, as I recall when we were learning shapes, each therapist that would come to our house had like a different take on it. And they would tailor it in different ways. But, you know, some people made a treasure hunt that they would go around the house and my son would have to find all the things that were whatever the shape of the week was, you know. So find 6 things in the house that are circles. And instead of having them move it and bring it to the table, they gave him like little dots and stars that he could put something on. I remember him putting a little star in the TV when he had square. Other people, you know, they approached it in lots of different ways, but it is something that we can get really creative with. One therapist, because my son was also working on cutting for his hand skills, had him cutting out shapes out of his favorite things and then decorating them because that was really reinforcing to him then. So another person who took him to the sandbox and said, we're going to draw these shapes and see what we can do. He fairly quickly, we saw that he loved to build things. So they would give him different building blocks. We started out with wooden blocks and that came in different shapes, and then quickly went to Duplos and then went to Legos. And they would give him these kind of difficult things. They would say, you know, build a red square or build a, you know, a blue rectangle. And when we would get to circle, you know, it would get challenging. But my son would be like, you know, figuring it out and figuring out how to make a circle. I remember when we got to sphere, he just, I don't know why he loved that word, and maybe he just loved that shape, but we would go places and other people would say, you know, do you want to play? We go to the park and someone would say, you want to play with a ball? And he'd go, it's a sphere. It's a sphere. This little kid, he was just so enthusiastic about the whole thing about a sphere. So make it exciting is the key, and it's so important. You can't minimize how important it is to get these core skills. Check it out in skills to see what all these things are, but spend some time on some shapes and make it fun. It's really worthwhile doing. It's that time of day when we show the A word, and we've been watching this same episode all week long. We're going to watch it one more time because it's so worthwhile. Take a look at this little boy and notice how fun they make his lessons so that while he's learning, he thinks he's playing. That's really the key. He thinks he's playing. He's having a really good time. And, you know, I go back to my conversation about which do you work on first? If you've got a child who's got to work on some sensory issues and when they can do things, do you just work on that, or do you work on building their skills? I think it's all, you know, maybe not always, but if you can give a child skills, sometimes it takes care of the sensory stuff. And so he's 3, this little boy. He's right at the age when my son started ABA, but he's already had it for 8 months. And you see he's speaking in sentences and he's thinking things through and he's enjoying himself. So take a look. This is the A word.
I know a cute little blue-eyed boy, and his name is Jack.
Jack Riley.
He got a big, warm, blue-eyed soul that makes your heart beat fast.
Hi, Jessica. Jessica's daddy.
That's right. Who's this? Who's this?
Bobby.
And who's that?
Daddy.
Who's that? Over there? Who's that?
She's in.
Good. And I totally think he's just aware of a lot of things now. People's names.
How's the behavior team doing with the inflexibilities?
He's still a big control guy. He still wants it the way he wants it.
In sessions, he was very, he'd get very upset.
And he gets upset fast, like for reasons that didn't used to upset him. He gets upset fast, and then once he's upset, everything upsets him.
Were they really long?
But it was a good half hour, the whole tantrum, which is long for him. really long.
Yeah.
And he would just get so upset.
Yeah, everyone tells us, it's not unexpected. He's 3 and blah, 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 but
So we get it, we know it.
still it's harsh. Yeah, he's 3, but he's our 3-year-old.
Tell me a vehicle.
Bicycle.
Good job. Tell me another vehicle.
Airplane.
Airplane is a vehicle. Yay. Okay, 2 more. Okay. Tell me a food.
I can't eat food.
Pancake is a food.
Yeah.
Tell me another food. Tell me another one.
Super easy food.
Cereal bar
is a food. Yeah.
I thought he said zebra. Hey, Jack Riley.
Yes.
Good job. Tell me an animal.
White Taurus is an animal.
What's that?
Tell me one more time. What's an animal?
White Taurus is an animal. White Taurus is an animal.
Rhinoceros.
Rhinoceros.
Oh, okay, it's an animal. Tell me another animal.
White Taurus is an
I
animal.
know. Tell me another one. Oh, here are your shoes. What animal is that?
Froggy.
Froggy is a what? No, frog is a
Arrow.
good. So tell me another animal.
White Taurus is an animal.
Rhinoceros is an animal, and tell me another one.
More pancake.
No, look at me. No, no, look at me.
White is an animal.
There you go. Thank you. Pancakes are not animals, silly.
There's a clue from it.
More pancake.
Yeah, and I don't mind if he looks around to like get clues, get hints. That's totally fine. Yes, I've been running sessions a little bit more like that lately, just because his behaviors have been really high. Just like if we're jumping on the bed or dancing, I'll stop for a minute and ask him like 3 or 4 questions, and then we'll just keep dancing or whatever we're doing. Let me probe. There's some stuff real quick.
What are you going to be probing?
Actions. So I just want to see if he already knows it, then I won't even bother introducing it. Give me kissing. Oh, good. What are the kids doing?
He's kissing.
Oh, they're kissing. Can you show me kissing? Oh, good job. Give me cleaning. Okay, good. What's the girl doing?
She's cleaning.
She's cleaning. Good job.
Water.
Okay, one more. Can I have it? One more. Give me crying. What's the baby doing?
She's babying.
What's she doing? What's the baby doing?
She's baby.
She's wah. She's crying.
She's crying.
Oh, okay. Maybe we'll do crying.
He's kissing.
She's kissing. What about this one? What's she doing there?
She's cooking.
Oh, she's cooking. Okay. And what's this one? What's she doing?
She's crying.
Oh, okay. So basically, he knows all of them. All right, cool. All right. What are they doing?
She's studying.
They're what?
There's cooking.
Oh, they're cooking. Good job.
What's that cooking? What's that cooking?
Mom is cooking?
What's that cooking?
Lots of cooking? Oh, okay, cool. All right, all done. Thank you.
Welcome back. That was the A word. You can see how much he's enjoying the interaction. This is one of the keys that we have to understand. If the child is not enjoying it, you're not going to get as far. Sometimes that takes a while to figure out how are we going to make this reinforcing enough for the child. Yeah, there gets to a point when the children are older, when they say, you know, why is this happening? I don't want to do this anymore. I'd rather be out with my friends playing. And that's when you know you're close to the end. That's when you know, all right, the child doesn't need this anymore. And we need to wrap this up, right? But when a child is not used to interacting with other people and you're trying to get them to interact with other people and gain these skills, social skills and other skills, it's just got to be so reinforcing that it's something that they look forward to. It's not going to work otherwise. And yes, even when they're little, there will be times when they don't like what's happening because they're going to be asked to do some things that are difficult for them, and they're going to be asked to let go of some old ways of behavior. I think we can all understand that. If you're watching reality shows that are these makeover kinds of shows where they're helping people to lose weight, there is a point when people get emotional and say, but I've done it this way forever. And usually the person that's, the therapist or the coach or whatever goes, yeah, and how's that working for you, right? Well, with a child with autism, you're not going to have that conversation with them and say, yeah, but how's that working for you? Because as far as they're concerned, it's working for them. But it's not. It's not going to help them to grow and progress. So they are going to have times where they're frustrated and even cry. And emotionally, that's hard for us as parents, but to realize, the thing that I always go back to is when a child's learning how to walk, they go through frustration and they fall and they hit their head. And we understand as adults and as parents that we just need to let them go through that frustrating time. There's just an understanding amongst all of us. I have never, in all my years of seeing parents interact with a child who's learning how to walk, seen a parent go, that's it, if you're just getting hurt and we're just not going to do this anymore. I'm done. It's frustrating you and that's it. You're not going to walk. We don't do that. Why? Because we know it's natural. We know it's a part of the progression. We know that we want them to walk and that means they're going to go through some frustration. Think of it the same way. This is what I had to do, the filter that I had to put it through, that I would sit on the other side of the door and I would hear my son sometimes being frustrated and I would think, I want to stop it. And then I would think, no, because it's just frustration. He's got to work through it. It's what is going to make him stronger. It's what's going to, and he's not being injured. And I knew that because I had a camera that was focused on the therapist and my child, so I knew exactly what was happening and I could hear it. And I think that's really important for your stomach lining, to know, not just guess, I think they're okay, because Shannon said that, it's going to be frustrating. No. You need to know for yourself. You need to know that what's happening is just frustration. You're watching the camera, okay, he's not being hurt, she's not being hurt, but it is frustrating and it's important to acknowledge that it's frustrating for them, but that they're going to work through it and that it's worthwhile. So check out the A Word. I get off on tangents today. Check out the A Word. They have their own YouTube channel. You'll see that there are times when Jack Riley gets frustrated. You'll see that it's hard for his parents. You'll see that the therapists are not hurting him, and that he's better for it afterwards, after he works through the frustration. It's a really lovely, lovely series. You can go back and watch episodes. Which number episode was that we were watching, Emily, to give you? That was episode 37. So if you have never seen this before, you have 36 episodes to go back and watch, and I believe that there are a few after that one. If you wanted to watch ahead, you could. But I want to transition right now because I went on Facebook to look up the answers to the questions of the day and saw this article that I don't know how I've missed in the last couple of days. And this comes from the Air Force Times, not a publication, by the way, that I normally subscribe to, but somebody sent me this link, that a judge orders TRICARE to expand autism therapy. And you can find this at www.airforcetimes.com. This is an article that's written by Patricia Kaimi that came out on Wednesday, so I am behind the times here. So a federal judge has ruled that TRICARE must cover autism therapy for children of military retirees. This is a huge, big deal. But reimbursement for the treatment, called applied behavioralists, could be years away while the issue remains tied up in courts. But this judge, Judge Reggie Walton of the U.S. District Court of U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia, ruled on July 26 that TRICARE's coverage of ABA for family members of active duty troops, but not for family members of military retirees, is quote-unquote arbitrary and capricious. Thank you, Judge Walton, because we have all been saying that for this longest time. If you were active duty, your child, ABA was covered to some extent. It seems like it's really dependent on the officer on the base that you're on, how much it's covered by. But if you were not active duty, your child was no longer covered. And I think we can all see what kind of a hardship that could be for families. Here you are, you know, whether it's the mom or the dad, and your child is diagnosed with ABA, and you're forced to decide, okay, I would think your instinct would be, I need to be home more. Now is not the time to take business trips, right? And in the military, business trips are stressful, you know, going away for 6 months to 2 years at a time where you can't come back willy-nilly for holidays, birthdays, or IEP meetings or clinic meetings. But for families having to decide, do I go inactive duty and we lose our ability to get therapy, or do I go active duty and maybe be somewhere in the country where I cannot be a part of this team? That's a terrible, terrible choice to make. So I love this judge's decision saying that this is arbitrary and capricious. And how about if you're ready to retire from the military, that you should be able to do that and still have access. You've devoted your life and you're at retirement age, your child should still have access to therapy. In any case, citing previous supporting cases, Walton sent the class action suit back to TRICARE, quote, with instructions that ABA therapy coverage be provided to TRICARE beneficiaries who otherwise qualify for reimbursement. Under TRICARE, ABA therapy is paid for under the Extended Health Care Option Program, which is available only to active duty personnel. Reimbursement for intensive therapy, which teaches and reinforces behavior skills, stops when the active duty TRICARE sponsor retires. Not fair. Autism advocates are hailing the decision as a big milestone for military families. Let's hope that that's the truth, that it trickles down that way. We have a quote from Karen Driscoll, who used to work for Autism Care and Treatment Today and has now gone over to be the Associate Director of Government Affairs for Autism Speaks. And Karen said the government has finally taken a step toward providing all men and women who have served our country with health care Americans expect them to have. Oh, Karen, very well said. A TRICARE spokesman declined to comment on the ruling, saying that the activity does not comment on ongoing litigation, an indication that the Defense Department may appeal. Oh, shame on you. The class action suit, Kenneth Berg versus the United States, was filed initially by an Air Force retiree and his wife, Dawn Burge, on behalf of their son, whose treatment cost over $50,000. Families of active duty troops are covered up to $36,000 annually for ABA treatment, which is not enough. Thank you very much. From 2005, okay, this is where, let's talk about some numbers here. From 2005 to 2008, TRICARE registered 9,300 beneficiaries under the age of 21 with autism, 6,025 active duty dependents, and 3,271 family members of active duty and reserve component retirees and survivors. Another 10,000 family members had a related disorder such as Asperger's syndrome or PDD-NOS. The House version of the 2013 Defense Authorization Bill includes a provision that would put into law coverage of ABA for children of military retirees and also remove the $36,000 annual cap. It's funny, as I was looking down and seeing the word cap, and I was thinking, crap, because that's what it is, $36,000. I would like to see anyone who is a politician be told that their child, if they had a brain tumor, had a cap of $36,000. And we are supposed to have this mental health parity, that if there is any other brain trauma, that we have the ability to have the same amount of coverage. So shame on you, ladies and gentlemen, if you're thinking that $36,000 is enough, and apparently the House is saying no, it's not. It's not a cap, it's crap. I'm sorry, that's just so inappropriate, but you know what I'm saying. The Senate version of the defense bill does not include similar language, making this one of many issues that will have to be reconciled later this year in a final compromise version of the defense legislation. This is where I encourage all of you to go to autismvotes.org and find who your senators are. Autism Votes will help you to write a form letter that is addressed to them. We were hearing from Mark Sirkin from Autism Speaks earlier this week that they are close to or have an app that you can put it on your phone that you can push, and they will contact your representatives for you. But I would let your senators know that they need to get on board and online, that this cap is crap. You can quote me. These are people who have served our country. Shame on you. Shame on you if you think that $36,000 is enough. And I challenge you to say that you would accept that if it was your child or grandchild. Shame on you. Okay, but kudos to Judge Reggie Walton. And again, you can see this article on www.Air Force Times. Okay, let's take a quick break. We're going to come back and talk about our question of the day and the answers that you guys sent. If you want to, now's a good time to respond on Facebook. The question was, what would you like to change about your circumstances? Stick with us.
Skills is a revolutionary web-based program that incorporates comprehensive assessment, curriculum design, progress tracking, and treatment evaluation for children with autism all in one place. Developed by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. Our approach is based on over 40 years of research on the principles of learning and their application to improving the lives of children with autism. How does Skills work? Created with speed and simplicity in mind, Skills was modeled on an easy 3-step process. Step 1. Start assessment. Step 1 begins with our intelligent assessment system, which consists of a series of questions. This assessment is essential to identifying your child's level of skills compared to their typical peers across all areas of development. This includes assessing social, motor, language, adaptive, play, cognition, executive functions, and academic skills. Every skill has an assigned age, which indicates when the skill emerges during typical development. This means that each child is automatically presented only with lessons that are relevant to his or her age. Step 2. Choosing activities. It's now easier than ever to build an individualized treatment plan. In Step 2, you are presented with an individualized pool of activities that are directly linked to your student's assessment results. Each activity represents a specific skill that has been indicated by the assessment as needing to be taught. Activities are categorized by curriculum and then by lesson. There are 3 main types of skills: building blocks, fundamental, and expansion skills. Fundamental skills are necessary for successful everyday functioning. Building blocks are prerequisites to a fundamental skill. Expansion skills are non-essential skills, but may provide further enrichment in certain areas. After reviewing the activities available to you, you can quickly add your chosen activities to the treatment plan by simply checking the box and clicking the button. Step 3. Start treatment. Once you have selected and added the activities you want, you are ready to begin teaching. Skills provides you with all the tools necessary to design and manage an effective curriculum plan, such as printable activity guides that are customizable by the teacher, supplemental teaching aids including printable data sheets, teaching guides, visual aids, worksheets, and tracking forms. Detailed IEP goals and benchmarks for each activity. Brief and visually appealing video tutorials. A variety of treatment progress and clinical timeline charts, and lots more. And since Skills is completely web-based, everything you need is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in one easy-to-access location. Skills users even benefit from unlimited access to a support community where they can ask questions and share ideas with a skills expert. Skills is always with you.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I am having a wonderful time reading some of these things that you guys have written in today to the question of the day, which was, what do you wish you could change about your circumstances? Now, yesterday, our question of the day was, what do you wish you could change about yourself, right? And yourself and your circumstances are, of course, interrelated, but they're a little bit different. And so I like some of these responses. Somebody wrote in and said, I wish I had a ton of money so I could afford the schools or after-school program that I wish for without worrying. I think that's a wonderful thing to wish for just a ton of money. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, especially for an autism parent. And another person who said, I would change the fact that the school district resists outside services and yet struggles to provide those services to students. My child is more important than their misplaced pride. Oh, I hear you. Keep on plugging on that because, especially when you get a couple of parents, things change. It takes time and patience, and sometimes, an act of God. But things move, things change. That more autism therapy centers would get insurance providers on board. And that's going to be happening. We found a great place for our Nikki a year ago, but it's very expensive and they still don't have Aetna on board. Sigh. It might be interesting for you to really lobby hard, get a couple of other parents who would say to your provider, you know what, if you would work with this insurance company, then this many more people would come. I really think, okay, let's back up a little bit. There are some ABA providers who have taken a stance and said, well, we're not, insurance, and we don't want to be, and we don't want to have that division, and we don't want to deal with it. I got to tell you, that's going to go by the wayside because a lot more ABA providers are saying this is crucial, that if more parents have access to and are educated about insurance, then they're going to be able to get more services. It behooves them. I mean, come on. They are in the business of wanting to help more children. And if they can do that and grow their business, what's the loss? So keep applying pressure in a really, really nice way. Get some other parents in your local support group to say, look, even email saying, you know what, I would bring my child to you if you had this. You get 5 or 6 parents doing that, somebody's going to start to pay attention. And go the other route too, and go to Aetna and say, lobby them, tell them how they could do this, that this could, seriously, you'll see, change is coming. And this reminds me that we have a bunch of different things that we want to talk about in terms of organizations that are helping parents to learn about how to get the insurance thing up and running. I'm going to finish this up, and then we're going to talk about a couple of different events. One that the Spot is doing tomorrow, and one that the Center for Autism and Related Disorders is doing this weekend and the weekends coming. Emily, don't let me forget. Okay, so another person, bless your heart, when the question was, what would you change about your circumstances? And she wrote everything with a smile. You know what? I just want to say to you, if this question had been asked me, 5.5 years ago, that's exactly what I would have responded without hesitation, because it just seemed like we were circling the bottom of the toilet, man. You want to talk hard times. I was having panic attacks. I didn't know what was going to happen. We had been in a condo for a while, and it had been okay. We were, hobbling by financially, not really having enough money to make anything work out. And our landlord died. And not only that, we discovered that he had been taking our rent money and not paying his mortgage with it. So he was being foreclosed upon and we were being kicked out of our apartment. Oh, you guys. Oh, we weren't going to get our security deposit. Oh, bad times. I mean, and then more stuff on top. It was a really, really rough time. And I'm just here to tell you that things change. Things change, and I can look back at that time and we didn't even know what was happening for a period of time. We were paying our rent, and they weren't telling us that the landlord had died or that he was being foreclosed upon. We were the last ones to know. But how we eventually found out was we had a washer-dryer unit in the condo apartment, and the dryer stopped working. Midsummer, it was this time of year, so hot. And the air conditioner. It was the dryer and the air conditioner, the two. Double whammy, forgot that. That's funny that I would forget that because it seems like it's emblazoned on my brain. And we called the landlord to say, hey, we need somebody to help us. The air conditioner, you got to send over, and no answer, which was very unlike him. And we kept calling, and there was no answer. And it went weeks, and we were panicking, thinking, what are we going to do? And finally, the ex-wife of the landlord called and said, yeah, I'll get somebody out there in a couple of weeks, but, he died and we're trying to sort it all out. So we were literally unable to use air conditioning, 113 degrees, I'm not kidding, and, fans everywhere, thinking we were spending time at the mall, doing therapy at the mall because it was so hot that the therapists were saying I'm going to pass out. And when we were at home stringing clothesline, because we're in a condo, we don't have a backyard to dry clothes, and I couldn't be going to the laundromat all the time that I needed to because we needed to be at therapy. So at night we would string a line through the condo and hang the laundry on the line. You'd get up in the morning and think that you were in a factory because all these clothes hanging from these lines. It was ridiculous. And there were a couple of days when I said, man, can we catch a break here? This is just, and I look back at that time, and can I tell you, I have a sense of humor about it now. I know it was just horrible. But I'm not there anymore. I'm so not there anymore. And my husband and I, we kept being, all right, well, what can we do? Where are our rights? What can we do? What are our options? We'll get through this somehow together. It just made us that much closer. And I think back of it, it is this very, almost, I'm going to say it, romantic time where we survived. And so I promise you, keep plugging. It does get better. It does get better. Not to say that everything is always going to be hearts and flowers and roses. No. But there's something that's really empowering about surviving it. And you come out better than you were before. So hang on. It's going to get better. Another person who says, more money. I sat at home. And while we could really use another income, I stay at home is what it is. I stay at home, and while we could really use another income, what I do here is so much more important. And I agree with that. I think, so important that you do what you have to do, and for different people, that's different things. But another time will come, your time will come. Another person says, money, I could do more if I had more money. I think that's true for all of us. My son's circumstances have given our family the gifts of patience, different understanding from time to time, and true love. I wouldn't change a thing. Oh, bless you. I want to be you when I grow up. Another person who says, I would change the communication or available programs for our autistic adults. Their parents don't live forever, and we must teach them to be self-sufficient. I agree. That's one of the things that we all worry about, isn't it? Another person who says, I wish I had family support and their acceptance of my son's diagnosis. And I think that's a wonderful thing to wish for, and it may happen. It may. If it doesn't, though, clearly you're going to go on. You're going to keep on keeping on. And there comes a time when there are some people that you just have to say, you know what? The fact that you don't get it is your issue, not ours. And I will tell you that I've gotten to that with a couple of people, and there's a peace that comes when you go, clearly that's your problem. You are, right? Denial, we all understand. We were in denial for a couple of minutes to a couple of years at some point, right? And so when your loved ones are in denial, I've shared before that I have a really good friend who had complete and total denial. about, and still does, about my child ever having a diagnosis. And I just look at him and I go, I know why, because you didn't want that for me. You just didn't want that for me. And you know what? That's a lovely sentiment. It's not useful to me. So I just go, be on that planet all by yourself over there, and you could think that, you know, that didn't happen and we didn't go through 5 years of ABA, bless you. You don't get it. That doesn't mean that I can't still appreciate and love you, but I'm not going to get into conversations with you about that. Just not. You don't get it. You don't want to get it. I get that. And at the core of it, you don't want to get it because you care about me and you would never have chosen that for me. All right, whatever. And I don't have to argue it in my head anymore. I can just move on and be around him and, you know, go, all right, you're on a river in Egypt. Okay. Denial. Okay, I mentioned there are more of these, but I want to get to some of these things that are happening this weekend. There's actually a lot of stuff that's happening this weekend. Let's first talk about some of the free stuff that's happening for insurance that's being done by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. Emily, have we got that slide that we can put up for them so that we can show some of the dates? Okay, so if you're in the state of California, and we now have insurance reform, ta-da, isn't that a wonderful thing? And you would like some more information about how you can access your insurance and really helpful information about what might be useful to you, then take a look at some of these dates. Now, some of them have already passed, but you'll see that today in Sacramento from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. in Sacramento, there is a free, this is totally free, although it's best if you RSVP. You can go to the seminar and ask questions. There's going to be a presentation. You can see what insurance companies will and will not cover, types of plans and rules regarding coverage, effective strategies to maximize your benefits, how to understand the complexities of different insurance carriers, which plans will have to comply with SB 946, which was the law, so that you can find out, begin to find out whether or not your insurance company is going to cover it or not, and some strategies to help, sorry, I'm trying to do too many things at the same time, to help you to sort that out and to know what to do during open enrollment. This is a really important thing that could save you thousands of dollars. And then there is another one tomorrow. I'm sorry, Emily, can we have it one more second? There's another one tomorrow in the East Bay from 10 a.m. to 12. That's located in Lafayette, California. And if you'll notice, then coming up there on August 18th on Saturday, there's one here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters here in Tarzana. And if you come to that seminar, ask them, say, hey, can I see the studio where Shannon does Autism Live? We're on the second floor, and hopefully there'll be somebody who can show you the studio. And then on Saturday, August 25th, there is one in San Diego, and I forgot to mention the one on August 11th coming up in Garden Grove. So really important. That is all free for you. Now, the folks over at the Hotspot, Deli and Greg. We've had Greg on the show. They're just wonderful. I hope you guys are participating on the Hotspot, hotspot.com, and they're also on Facebook. They're having an event tomorrow as well that is being done in conjunction with Trumpet Behavior Health, how to secure services for your child with autism. And this is being put together by Trumpet Behavior Health and Heyman Hakimi, an educational workshop for parents struggling to obtain services for their children. There's going to be a presentation, Insurance 101, how to secure coverage using private insurance. So if your insurance isn't covering and you already know that, this might be the event for you to go to. And what it can mean for you, how to appeal or file a grievance, what to look for in an ABA provider when using insurance, and Mr. Hakimi will present IEP 101. So if you're having a hard time, we talked about IEP today, what that stands for, the Individualized Education Plan. So he's got IEP 101, navigating the IEP process, do's and don'ts within an IEP meeting, fundamentals of goals and objectives, how to procure appropriate services for your child, and how to request the district to fund independent educational evaluations. So that is free, and that is tomorrow, August 4th, Saturday, August 4th, from 3:30 to 5:30, and that's in Los Alamitos, California. And you can find out, and you're supposed to RSVP by today. You can find out more about that by going to, there's an email here for you. I'm going to give you the phone number. Let's do this. You ready? It's 562-248-6435. Again, that's 562-248-6435. And we are being told about this from Deli and Greg over at the Otspot. So otspot.com. Again, the phone number if you want to RSVP is 562-248-6435. So if you're in the Los Angeles area, now it's located in Old Town Seal Beach. And they serve clients in Orange County and LA County. So that's, the address is 11801 Kensington Road in Los Alamitos, California. The zip is 90720 if you need to MapQuest it. Again, it's free from 3:30 to 5:30 tomorrow. And thank you to them over at the Otspot for making us aware of that. You're going to see that as the insurance changes, more and more people are going to be offering you an opportunity to learn, and these are some great opportunities to get yourself started and have ABA funded by somebody else. How much better does that get? I know for some of you around the country, and you're saying, yes, but all of these things are in California. But you know what? Visit www.autismvotes.org and see where your state is. Whether you already have it and have had it for 2 years, or it might be that legislation is being introduced this year and you might want to get involved with that, or just post some things, social marketing, to let people know how important this is to you. Okay, we're going to take a short break, and we are going to come back and do our IEP tip of the week, actually, oddly enough. So stick with us.
Hi, I'm Shannon Penrod, and this is my son Jem. We're here today at the Home Depot. You might know that Home Depot is famous for giving free classes to adults on lots of things like tiling and other home crafts. Well, they also have free classes for kids as well. It's called the Kids Workshop. We love doing that, don't we, Jem?
Yeah.
It's cool. So come on inside with us and let's do a craft.
Yay.
The Kids Workshop is a program that's been around with Home Depot almost since we've been a company, and it's been developed to allow kids in the community to come in and give them an opportunity to build something, to be able to create something, and be able to take just simple wood pieces and put them together with nails and hammers and screwdrivers and then paint them.
So you do this every first Saturday of the month.
Any Home Depot that you go to on the first Saturday of every month between 9 and 12, you can join different associates throughout different stores and build these projects with these kids.
And do they have to do anything beforehand, or can they just show up on that Saturday?
All they need to do is show up. We have all the tools, all the materials that the kids will need. We have aprons that we give to the kids that they can take home and maintain their pins. They get pins on a regular basis for completing projects. With that, they can keep track of how many projects they've done. And
it's all free.
It's all absolutely free, all provided.
Which is wonderful. And Wilson, I have to say, you guys devised this for all kids to be able to do this.
Correct.
What I particularly love about it as an autism mom, it gives my child a place to come and learn a new skill, to socialize with kids of all kinds.
Absolutely. And that's what we're here for. Home Depot is definitely loves to be involved with the community and bring the community in to work with us. That's what we love to do.
Welcome back to Autism Live, and I'm so glad that Emily played that, because I also want to remind you that tomorrow is the Kids Workshop Day at Home Depot, and I'm on their site. It is Building a Quirk bulletin board tomorrow. They've teamed up with EPA's Energy Star and with the Dr. Seuss Lorax movie, so there's going to be a full-size cutout of the Lorax. So bring your camera, so your child's going to be able to go there, and for free. You don't have to register, you don't have to RSVP, you just show up from 9 a.m. to noon. I would tell you to get there earlier as opposed to later, because sometimes they do run out of the craft, right? And that's always a bummer if you get there and you're too late. But you get there, your child gets an apron, sometimes they get goggles, sometimes not, depending upon the location. These are at all Home Depots, and they're free. And your child gets there and they get the apron, they write their name on it, and they get to put together the craft there and paint it if they want to. Now, if your child is having sensory issues, you can say, you know what, I think we're probably going to go home to fill this out. And they are always wonderful. They're so accommodating. But if you do stay, and if your child can handle it, even for a small amount, maybe they start to build it and you go, all right, so now we're going to go home. Okay. Just make sure it all comes in a bag. And when you rip open the bag, make sure that, if you're not sure if you're going to stay for the whole time, don't rip the bag to shreds and throw it away, because you might need to put pieces back in. We did this for years, where we would go and we'd get a certain amount of the craft done, then, it'd be time to go. He'd had enough, and we would leave and finish putting it together at home where it was more quiet. But over the years, now he goes and he puts the craft together and he's like, let's paint it, and I want to talk to the other kids, and he makes friends, and it's a social opportunity as much as it is a problem solving and an arts and craft and a small your finger and hand skills, fine motor skills. And on top of that, this week, bring your camera, because you'll have a photo op with the Lorax for your kid. These things are wonderful, and they're the kinds of things that I can tell you quite honestly, they're the kinds of things that you'll look back and you'll have memories about. The day-to-day grind melts into itself, right? And those aren't the things that we remember, oh, it's hard, right? But we don't remember on that Tuesday when, everything under the sun happened. But we do remember these kinds of things, and it's that social opportunity too. So go to the Kids Workshop at Home Depot tomorrow. Have a wonderful time. Your child will also, talk about having a reinforcer. They're smart. They're ABA smart. They will give your child a pin that commemorates the craft that they did, and they get a certificate. Now, depending on your child's skills and where they are developmentally, you might want to show them the pin and hold on to it. It comes in a little plastic thing, so you really have to make an effort to open it up. But it's a sharp thing, and if your child is not at the point where they can deal with that, use caution. For years, we kept the pins in a separate place, and only now my son is old enough that he can have them decorate his apron. Wonderful, wonderful thing at the Home Depot Kids Workshop. So go to that. All right, I mentioned that it is the time of week when we have our IEP tip of the week. And our tip this week is to get everything in writing. Get everything in writing. It's so important that when you're having communications about IEP, they have a responsibility to give you an invitation to an IEP meeting, first of all. And they have to give it to you in a timely manner. So if the day before your IEP, somebody, says to you, oh, by the way, we're having an IEP meeting, and they're not handing you an invitation, they're not in compliance. They need to give you an invitation in writing. And I think it's beneficial for you in all your contacts with the school to have a written record of everything. And one of the things that you can do, and we've heard from it's that time of year, we need to get some of our legal consultants back in. We've had Valerie Vanneman, who's a fabulous education lawyer in, and also Bonnie Yates of the Bonnie Z. Yates firm, another fabulous advocate and attorney that is very knowledgeable. We need to get those ladies back in here. But in any case, we've heard from them that emailing counts as a written record. And one of the things that we can do is, a lot of times you go to school to pick up your child and somebody says something to you, right? And we always advocate that when you go to an actual IEP meeting, you ask them in writing at least 48 hours beforehand, because in some states it's 24, some it's 48, so do 48 and you'll be okay. In writing, via email is fine. But for the conversations that you have when you're picking your child up at the gate, or you're in the classroom volunteering, or the principal calls you on the phone, you don't get prior knowledge and have a tape recorder set up, right? So really important to leave a paper trail for the conversations that you've had. So if you're picking your child up and the RSP teacher comes up and says something to you and you go, I think I need to have a record of that, I would say always make a record of it. So any conversation that you have with somebody, you then send them a follow-up email, and I was taught this years ago from a lawyer friend, that you write, as per our conversation today at the gate, when you said to me X, Y, and Z, and I said to you, I just want to go on record as saying da-da-da-da-da, whatever it is. I'm in agreement with you. I don't think that this is advantageous, da-da-da-da-da-da. And there is a written record. This as per our conversation today, because that's when you have an opportunity to say, you said this. Now they can write back and say, I didn't say that, but now we're in a he said, she said, or she said, or he said, right? And there is a written record that if you end up having to go to arbitration, you can say, here's what happened. And if it happens over and over again, you know, you're going to be better off. It's so important always to have a written record. I know at least one time at our school, and rules are different everywhere, right? But when we go in to volunteer at our school, anytime you go in and you're going to step, there's you know, the building, and that's the only way you can get into the campus. I love that. Everything else is locked. And you have to sign in if you're going to go work in your child's classroom or you're going to drop off their lunch. You are not supposed to just walk through the doors. Now, there are times when, you know, I guess you could. And I volunteered on such a regular basis when my son was in kindergarten that there were some days and I would be late, you know, and I'd be running to get there to volunteer, and I'd go, do I want to sign in or not? And I would go, it's important to sign in. It's important to follow the rules. It's important for safety. You know, I'm sure I could have gotten away without signing in because everybody knew who I was. But I made it my business to follow the rules and sign in, not realizing how important it was going to be because it's so important to have a written record. And later on, you know, there was somebody who in the administration who was saying that they had observed my child a certain number of hours, which I knew was not the case. Let's just say that. I knew that that could not be the case. Why? Because I had been there. And I had a written record of when I was there and she didn't. Let me just say that when you have the written record, it's a wonderful thing. And not only that, there was a day when my child went to go surfing with Surfers Healing, and we had signed him out, and we went to the trouble to sign him out and say, we're going to Surfers Healing. And that was one of the days that she said that she observed him. Love it. You know, sometimes it's just so, isn't it so nice when you get it right and somebody else doesn't? Oh, it just pays to have a written record. Have a written record. You will just be so happy when you do. Okay, so that's, and make sure when there isn't a written record, make one. As per our conversation today, use email. It's really beneficial. Okay, that is our IEP tip for the week. It just makes me extra happy. Certainly I wasn't happy at the time, but all right, we're going to take a break. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about our social tip for the week. So stick with us.
When the Center for Autism at University of Houston clearly got established in 2008, all of our programs are pretty much geared toward younger children. But shortly after we opened our doors, I started getting contacted by parents of children who were older and parents of adults, wanting to know what services were available for them. And so I started looking into it and realized that there had been very little research conducted with adults, particularly adults who are considered high functioning, adults who have no intellectual disabilities, and yet they have problems. And one of the biggest ones that I found when I did the research was in obtaining and maintaining employment. In fact, the majority of them are unemployed. Which I found really surprising, considering they had no intellectual disabilities and were quite capable of doing all kinds of important things for our society. And then, so that kind of caught my interest. And then, it's hard to say exactly how I put the two together, but we have a clinic on campus where we provide early intervention services to young children with autism. And I started thinking about some potential vocational training programs for individuals who were high functioning. And I just started thinking about how we provide very structured training. So when we're teaching someone to work with a young child with autism, we provide very structured training, immediate feedback, and many of the procedures that we're teaching them to use with young children are pretty invariant, very scripted. And from what I was hearing in the research, there's been some studies where they interviewed people, adults with high-functioning autism, about employment and why they had trouble at their prior jobs. And a lot of it had to do with inadequate feedback, inadequate training, intolerant coworkers. And I started thinking about the way behavior analysts typically train their therapists. So what I decided to do was do a pilot study, and initially it was just going to be all in role play. So they weren't going to actually work with any young children. But I had never worked with this population. I'd never worked with adults with high-functioning autism, so I didn't know what to expect. And it was just amazing. They picked it up so quickly that we quickly added a phase 2 to the pilot study and had them actually working with a young child too. Initially they learned the components of discrete trial teaching, and they did that in role play. And then we had them work with a young child, teaching them a similar skill, and we showed not only did their skills generalize to the young child, but we showed acquisition of the young child in that skill too. One thing we also did, it's one thing to, come up with very objective definitions of correct use of procedures we're teaching, but there might be some qualitative aspects to teaching that aren't captured by our system. And so in addition to taking data on their behavior in terms of what they were doing when they were teaching, we also showed video clips of them teaching to 3 experts in behavior analysis. We didn't tell them anything other than we would like you to rate this. This is a newly trained person, and we had them use a rating scale and rate how effective they thought they were, how likely they would be to hire them. And we had them rate our participants as well as an undergraduate student who had no developmental no disability, but had never, was a novice, and we just trained her to do the same thing. We put her through the same training, and we also had them rate one of our graduate students in behavior analysis. And what we found was the experts gave similar ratings to the undergraduate student and the graduate student, but lower ratings to our participants, even though the accuracy was the same. They were just as accurate as our undergraduate student and our graduate student. So clearly there were some qualitative aspects of their maybe voice, the tone of their voice, amount of eye contact, things like that. And so I think that would be something to work on next, is looking at that and coming up with ways to teach that as well. We're interested in expanding the teaching to other ABA methodologies. And I'd also like to look at other vocations as well, and just looking at vocational skills and the types of skills needed to be successful on the job.
Welcome back. So that was Dorothea Lerman. She was so wonderful to talk to. I got so excited talking to her, and can I tell you, I could have sat and talked to her for hours. We have to have her on the show and have it be a longer conversation, but she was so knowledgeable and just, one of those people that has that really calm energy that you enjoy talking to. And I got so excited. There were so many different things that she was there at ABAI to talk about, but I only had a couple of minutes to talk to her, and I said, okay, so this is the thing I want to talk about, because I thought it was fascinating, this idea of having older, teenagers and young adults learning how to be therapists for our kids. I don't know. When we see what the unemployment rates are for young adults with autism, and yet we know that there's stuff that they're really incredibly good at. We showed on Wednesday Joey Travolta, who's just an incredible person and runs Inclusion Films, and he takes young people who otherwise don't have skills and don't know what they want to do, and he shows them all of the different aspects of film production, from running craft services to doing the makeup to being in front of the camera to being the sound person to being the prop person. And it's so empowering to watch him work with these kids. I can't wait until my son is old enough to participate in his, longer-term group in Burbank. And, it's just amazing what he accomplishes with these young adults, and to see their passion and how excited they get and how empowered that they are when they have a skill and they're using it well. And we know that there are some amazing, we had Mark Sirkin from Autism Speaks who was in here talking about a company that does video games and that they hire young adults on the autism spectrum because they know they're going to be incredible, that they're going to be detail oriented, that they're just going to have a different way of seeing things that's going to be really productive for somebody doing computer programs. So we know that there are jobs out there that are really well suited to our kids, and finding out what they all are and giving the young adults and the adults the training so that they can do them for the betterment of their lives and of society. I just think that that's a subject we can't talk enough about, right? And anybody who is trying to solve that issue, just, I have to say, has my highest respect. And so to hear, this was something I had not heard about before, the idea of turning this around and using these young adults as therapists. I know that they don't have it entirely figured out yet, but I love that they're working on it. And I think that it's something that we're going to hear more and more about. Who better to know how to teach our kids how to overcome some of the more disabling aspects? It's just a very exciting thing for me. Speaking of disabling aspects, this is sort of my theme for today, this, differently abled, not disabled. I don't know that I necessarily like those terms. I was raised in a family, my mom is someone who has, well, I guess you would say a physical disability, but that's not how I was raised. I did not know that my mom was different, and I didn't know that there were things that my mother wasn't capable of, quite honestly, because my mother was raised by her mother with this idea that you've got different rules, but that doesn't mean you can't do everything that you don't want to do, or everything that you do want to do. That's what I want to say. And so my mother was born with both of her feet clubbed. Both of her feet were actually backwards when she was born, and one of them much more severe than the other. And she walked with braces for a lot of her life, and certainly growing up. And my mother wanted to play basketball, so my mother did, in a brace. And my mother wanted to be a cheerleader, so my mother did. There are pictures of my mother in her high school yearbook, and she's there with all the other girls, and sometimes she's in the brace, sometimes she took the brace off for a picture. But you can see that one of her legs is significantly different shape than the other one, and she was not allowed to let that stop her. She was helped to find the way to make it so that she could do things. And that was how my mother always was. I think I've told the story before on the show that when I was young, it was the summer before I was set to go into kindergarten, that first period of time when memories are really, really fresh. And I can remember playing in the sandbox outside of our house, and we could hear screams coming from a house down the street that was across a very busy intersection and down the street. And my mother was also a nurse and someone who was very effective in emergency situations. So my brother and I are in the sandbox, and we hear these screams, and my mother, who is on crutches after a recent surgery, so not even, in the brace, she's on crutches, and she hears the screams, and somebody is screaming, saying, "My baby, my baby, my baby, my baby's dead, help." And what had happened was they were having a birthday party and in the backyard, and there was an above ground pool, and everybody was hanging out in the birthday party, and at one point I guess they went in the house to have the cake or whatever, and a 2-year-old had gone up the ladder into the pool and wasn't conscious or breathing. And this was in the day when, I'm really dating myself here, but this was late 60s, and not everybody knew about the Heimlich maneuver, not everybody knew about CPR, and not everybody knew what to do when someone was drowning, but my mother did. And she was the person on crutches. There were a lot of able-bodied people standing around, but it was half a block away, and my mother took off on crutches, pole vaulted over a small hedge, but still on crutches, pole vaulted over the hedge because she knew that there was a certain amount of time, got there and was able to resuscitate this 2-year-old. That was who my mother was, right? So, when I had a child who was differently abled, I was coming at it from a point of view of, okay, well, all right, differently abled. And I love to hear Temple Grandin's mother talk about different but equal. different but equal. You know, there's going to be a different path, there's going to be a different thing, but that doesn't mean that they can't. And watching this morning, as I was getting ready for work, some of the things about the Olympics, because you know tomorrow that a gentleman from South Africa is going to run in the 400-meter race. I'm going to get emotional. And he is going to run with those carbon legs. And they were doing a showcase piece on him this morning and talking about what his life, and I've been waiting all week to sort of hear, because I didn't know what his circumstances were when he had lost his legs. And he was born with a disorder that the main bone, the femur in the bottom half of his legs was missing. And his parents had to make the tough decision of what do we do, and they decided to amputate his legs. I don't know whether it's above the knee, below the knee, or if it's the same on both of them, but he does not have the lower portion of his legs. And he talked about his mom in this video this morning, and he said, you know, my mom was somebody who believed that I could do anything. And he said that was a knowledge that I always carried with me. She never allowed me any slack and said, okay, you know, put on your legs. You know, he would say, my legs hurt, or, you know, from the rubbing or whatever. And she would say, yes, okay, but you're still going to do it. Now put on your legs. And that's the last I want to hear about it. Suck it up, basically. But that she was always compassionate and helping him to find his way. That he was going to be different, but equal. And unfortunately, his mom passed away when he was in his early teens. But even that, he said, well, my family believes that we should celebrate the time she was with us, not more than the time that she's not here. But here he is. And tomorrow, he will be the first person ever to compete in a track and field event that is an amputee. And what was so interesting to me was that the only thing that he talked about that was ever difficult for him was when he went to qualify for the Olympics the first time before Barcelona. Or was it Beijing? I think it was Beijing. He went to qualify, and they mounted a complaint and said that his legs were giving him an unfair advantage. His carbon legs were giving him an unfair advantage. And they were asking him, you know, how did you feel about that? And he said, quite honestly, that was the hardest time for me, because here I'd had to overcome so much, and they were saying it gave me an unfair advantage. And he made the point, if that were true, then what we would see is all these record-breaking times with people using the same exact legs. But he got a lawyer and went through a series of tests to demonstrate to the Olympic Committee that he did not, in fact, have an unfair advantage, that he was a superior athlete. And he won. He won that and was given the opportunity to participate and see if he could qualify. And the first time he did not qualify. And they said to him, was that difficult? And he said, no, quite honestly, that's the thing that made me kick in high gear. And this time he has qualified. So he is going to run with gentlemen who have legs tomorrow in the 400 meter in the Olympics. And I think what an inspiration to all of us, and certainly as a mom, to hear what I was raised with. And I can remember my grandmother saying to my mother, you know, you have different abilities. But, you know, that doesn't mean that you don't do this because it's hard. It might be harder for you than it is for everybody else, but you're going to do it. And I was certainly raised with that idea, although I didn't have anything that was holding me back. And that's certainly something that I try to bring to my child, and appreciate him for who he is, and never ever say, well, you know, just because this is hard for him, I guess we're going to let that go. Right? So differently abled, but different but equal. So very important that we acknowledge that. Now, I was going to talk about that much later, and I was going to talk now about social skills, but you know how I am. I get off course. But let's take a minute to talk about social skills, because this is, you know, this does go hand in hand with this discussion, because this is one of the ways in which there are many things about an autism diagnosis that could be disabling, right? Certainly in the social skills area, if we were to let it go and say, well, this child has autism, they have difficulty with social skills, and we're not going to push them. We're not going to take them outside their comfort zone. We're not going to put demands on them because it's hard. We don't want to be mean. We don't want to be rude. What we would have is a child who has a disability, quite honestly. It very definitely has the ability to disable them, if they cannot participate in social circumstances. But can we turn that around? Can we build on the strengths that they do have, give them skills that they don't currently possess, help them to overcome the more disabling aspects of the social component of autism, and see what happens? And the answer is yes, we can. And when we do, our kids soar. They absolutely soar. So I wanted to take a minute today to talk about everything that is encompassed in the social skills arena. You know, we had Dr. Jonathan Tarbox in last Friday talking about the 3 different areas of the current autism criteria for diagnosis. And of course, the biggest area is that social component where you have to have a minimum of 2. And we talked about what some of those different things are within the social arena. Well, okay, that's part of the criteria. What are the lessons that we can teach to counteract the things that are on that list? Let's take a look. So in terms of social skills, and I'm going right off of the skills curriculum because these are the lessons that are available through the skills curriculum, which I've mentioned I use. So we have social skills. Here is this wide range of topics, all the different domains that are there. Non-vocal social behavior. When you stop and think about how much we communicate on a daily basis without ever uttering a word, right? And how frustrating it can be to be trying to talk to a child or a teenager or an adult who does not understand non-vocal social behavior. I remember somebody early on, my son always looked older than he was because he was very, very tall. And I can remember being at a playground and my son had very little receptive language either. So there was a woman at the playground who had a child who was probably 4, and my son was probably just about to be 3. And there was something that was happening, and she was a little ways away, and she said a couple of words to my son, but she was making all these gestures and going, you know, like, and we would all know that that's somebody saying, go over there. Well, now, why she was telling my son to go someplace, I don't know. Obviously not the person to listen to, right? But she got so mad at him because he wasn't listening to her. And she was making all these gestures and going, like, you know, and he didn't know. He had no concept. And now she's mad and she's got all these facial expressions and she's, you know, when pointing, and he, you know, she might as well have been doing some interpretive dance for all he was concerned. It had no meaning to him. And we see that that's the case with our kids a lot, that they don't understand gestures and don't use gestures. Remember that when we're teaching things, we're teaching it both expressively and receptively. They have to be able to understand it and they have to be able to do it. So we teach non-vocal social behavior, which is quite amazing. I mean, this is going to include things like eye contact, because so much happens with the eyes. When you choose to look at somebody and when you choose to look away, it suggests things to them. To be able to use gestures and those kinds of things, really super duper important for social behavior. Then we get to social language, and it's kind of hilarious to me that it's this little itty bitty bubble on the screen there, and yet it's huge. Huge curriculum. When you stop and think about when we have conversations with people and all the different components, whether it's the tone of our voice or the speed with which we say something, how we choose our words, what we're doing with our bodies while we're doing it, how we end a conversation, how we begin a conversation, how we jump into a conversation when a group of people are talking, what topics we talk about, how we transition topics, how we introduce a new subject. Oh my gosh, it's a lot. It's a lot. And of course, there are people who are really good at these kinds of things, and we see that those kinds of people excel in today's world, right? People who can negotiate all the social language. It's very interesting to see where people, and I'm talking about people who are not on the spectrum, obviously, but it's interesting to see how the impact that somebody's ability to socially communicate has, including social networking. Because haven't we all seen people in our lives that are great communicators, and then when it comes to social networking, they don't bother to learn the rules, right? And so they'll write something all in caps and everybody goes, why are you yelling at me, right? There are always rules, and a lot of times they're unspoken. They're unspoken in terms of social networking. Yeah, you can go pick up a book about them, right? And you think to yourself, I need the book. I need to understand because I need to be able to communicate in this way. I mean, I'm trying to figure out the whole texting thing right now because I know that my child can text like crazy. I didn't even know he could do it. He borrowed my phone to play a game one day and he was texting a friend of mine. I didn't even know that he knew about that. So I know I'm trying to catch up and understand what some of these different terms are. I've got two 19-year-old nephews that are talking to me so that I'm catching up. Because it's important to know the rules. Well, guess what? In regular conversation, those rules are there too. We just don't ever talk about them, and there aren't as many books published about it, quite honestly. A few, but there are some. But this is a great curriculum that, and I always like to say this, so great for our kids on the autism spectrum, right? They can absolutely use this. And I think that wherever they are, there's lessons. If you have a 2.5-year-old, there are lessons in the social language that you could be working on right now. But if you have a 22-year-old child with Asperger's, oh my gosh, there are a bunch of lessons that are going to help your child to be able to communicate and talk with people and build relationships that last. And by the way, I think for any adult who says, boy, I wish I knew what those unspoken rules are, here it is. Here's the curriculum. Here are the lessons. We can all strengthen our skills. I found it so fascinating to read this curriculum through and go, oh my gosh, I never thought about that before. Social interaction, how the give and take that we do and all the different things that are involved in that, so important. A whole area of lessons there. How about this one? Self-esteem. I don't know about you, but isn't that a bank you want to fill for your child's self-esteem? There's wonderful making positive self-statements, but there's some lessons in there about bragging. Like, what's the fine line between bragging and having self-esteem? Really important. We just were talking about that this last week with my son, because there were a couple of things that he was doing, and it was bragging, and we had to explain to him. He said, but you always want me to know that I'm a great person and I have these great things. Yeah, but you don't go broadcasting it to everybody. It's tough. It's a very gray line, right? Social context, to be able to understand that one behavior is okay in this social context, not in another. And going through those different things and knowing how to notice what's happening, learning through observation. If you see that everybody else is being quiet, then probably this is an environment in which we need to be whispering, right? Picking up on those social cues. How about this one? Social rules. That there are things that we do and things that we don't. Some of it's spoken, some of it is unspoken. Group-related events, whether, group being 4 people or group being 85 different people, and how we conduct ourselves and what's appropriate. And the other component of this that I haven't been mentioning, not only for our children to know what's appropriate for them, but how to recognize when somebody else is behaving, socially interacting with them in a way that is inappropriate. Whether it is an adult who is coming up to them on the street and asking them a question that is inappropriate because they are a person who is not somebody that they should be talking to, or one of their friends that's behaving in a way that's inappropriate with them, levels of friendship, understanding that. I found this really interesting that at the same time that my son was dealing with this in first grade, I was dealing with this personally too. Because, you have a friend and you think, or you have a family member or whatever it is, or a coworker or whatever that you feel is somebody who has your best interest at heart, and then somebody does or says something that clearly you see that is not the case, right? And how you respond to that. My son had a friend at school who he thought was his best buddy, but every day on the playground, the child was trying to choke him, or get him in trouble, or talk him into doing something that he knew he should not do. But he wanted to do it because he wanted to be with his friend, and we had conversations about, do you think this child wants to hurt you? And he would say, well, yeah, but he's my friend. And I would have to say to him, but does a friend ever want to hurt you? And that was something for him to think through and think, oh, okay, maybe I need to redefine friend. Something important for all of us to do, because your friends don't want to hurt you. right? And we all need to be reminded of that on a regular basis. So really important, this context. And then, of course, we get into absurdities, for them to understand when something is out of context, to understand humor and jokes, and when things are, what the difference between somebody being mean and somebody teasing, and when is teasing appropriate. And like I said, jokes and things like that. Understanding when things don't fit. What is, here we have this context, and you can start with kids young. Here's a beach scene, and you see all these people on the beach scene, and then there's somebody in a parka on the beach. It's absurd. It doesn't quite fit. And understanding where things are, it's really an amazing mind-expanding lesson for them, so that they start to notice things in their surroundings and how things fit together. Very, very exciting. So here's this wide range of things that we can help our kids work on. Whatever age they are, there are lessons that are appropriate. Wherever we talked about Swiss cheese earlier, wherever they need help and support, you take the assessment, and then you see which lessons would be advantageous for your child to work on. It's quite exciting. All right, that's our social skills tip for the day. We've already done our myth of the day. So we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back, and we're going to talk a little bit about challenging behavior and that ABA for beginners, how we can target challenging behavior. But right now we have another video from an interview from ABAI to show you. So take a look.
My wife, Lori Frost, and I developed PECS over 25 years ago. The idea was to help very young children with autism and other disabilities be able to learn how to functionally communicate, that is, interact with other people. There had been a lot of work on picture-based systems then, but they all involved teaching children to point to pictures. And a lot of children with autism would interact with a picture, but continue to ignore the people around them. So the simple idea in the beginning was to motivate the child to want something, figure out what does he really like. It could be something to eat, something to play with, something to do. And then teach him, instead of grabbing for that thing, pick up that one picture in front of you, hand it to the nice person next to you, and they'll give you what you want. And that was the very beginning of PECS. Everyone has that fear about either interfering with speech or blocking the development of speech using picture systems, PECS, or even sign language. The reality is people have looked for that problem for over 40 years, and no one has found any evidence of it. So when I speak to parents, I don't even wait for them to tell me what they're afraid of. I tell them I know what you're afraid of. But many other people have had the same fear. So we've looked for this very, very carefully. And the problem, especially in autism, is not that the child can't speak, is that he doesn't communicate. He doesn't interact with other people to get things done. We're often like furniture. So if I'm holding candy, great, I can take the candy out of your hand. But if the candy is on top of the table and I can't reach it, I'm just going to keep trying to climb on the table. I'm not going to turn to mom and look at her and look at the candy and point, or I'm just going to deal with that candy in and of itself. So the whole point about PECS is, no, people are important. You have to interact with people. Gives them lots of chances to then be near us, listen to what we're saying, practice making sounds, putting sounds together. There are a lot of skills that are needed to get speech going. It's not just one day the kid's going to look and say, thanks, Mom, you've been great. It comes in really slowly for typically developing children. We don't think of it that way because we don't notice how much teaching we're doing with typical children. It seems natural. But research shows that by the time a typical child's about 2 years old, they've practiced using their voice about 1 million to 1.5 million times. That's a lot of work. So with PECS, especially for the younger children, we need to get that interaction going. Of course, we're going to work on everything that gets speech going. The reality is, though, some children never develop speech, and we don't know why. Anyone who guarantees that I'm going to make your non-speaking child talk in 6 months or a year, they're not being ethical, because they cannot make that guarantee. We watched, over 80 children in the Delaware public school system learning PECS when they were younger than 5 years old, and the vast majority of them acquired speech. And the ones who were acquiring speech eventually developed just as much speech as the kids who had some speech coming in. They had the same kind of outcomes. Same number of kids went on to regular school who had a little bit of speech coming in versus had none and started on PECS. So again, learning to use PECS never interfered with acquiring speech or making that tremendous academic gain that a lot of us would like to look.
And in the meantime, when you get the functional communication skills going, the payoff is that you get less challenging behavior and the ability to work on more things, right?
Yes, I mean, that's been like a freebie. Yeah. Obviously we need to sometimes do a functional assessment to figure out why is he doing that. But there's also studies showing that just teaching functional communication with PECS leads to improved performance. It's not magic. Doesn't happen for everything.
It feels magic to parents.
Oh, it does. And it feels that way. Hey, it doesn't hurt as much either.
Right.
We know everybody likes technology, and technology can be beneficial. So everybody wants an iPad. It's really cool. The risk, of course, is that some children with autism will learn how to play with an iPad and then be more isolated. So our concern is to make sure that any kind of app for an iPad uses the same principles that we've built into PECS. So the first app that we have for an iPad that's going to come out this summer is just designed to help with discrimination. It will not be a full communication system, but sometimes children have trouble with choosing an apple versus sock. And one of the critical issues for effective learning is feedback, getting quick feedback. The nice thing about an iPad is we've essentially programmed the device that as soon as the child touches the right picture, it lights up, it grows bigger, it says a word, so it gives them immediate feedback like, yeah, you've done something really good. Of course, we follow through with giving them the item, but the device is quicker than anybody can be. So then probably in the fall sometime we'll come up with an app that it's more comprehensive, but it's really designed for children who already have some sentence structure and beyond. That is, there's no research showing that using any of these devices leads to quicker initial acquisition of vocabulary, but it certainly helps with the expansion of vocabulary for some kids. Go to PECS.com. You can get to the U.S. company there. We have offices in 13 countries and around the world, so if people speak another language, they can just go find the language of their choice and probably get to a company that's speaking that language too.
That was the wonderful Andy Bondi. What a wonderful person. So exciting to have an opportunity to sit down and talk with him. He and his wife, of course, developed the PECS program, the Picture Exchange System, and they've got a lot of really exciting stuff going on for them right now. And I love what he said about the fact that, because it's an emotional thing, when a parent hears, okay, we're going to work on PECS or any iconic communication system with a child, a lot of times the first response for the parent is, you're giving up on my child speaking, and that really is not the case. That really is not the case. Something we've been talking about a lot, and we've got an entire week coming up, I don't know whether it's next week or the week after, where we're taking on functional communication skills. How do we teach, for some of our kids, language is just difficult, spoken language, and for other kids it's another level of difficult. And that doesn't mean we give up on it, but in the meantime we need to help them. I always like to say, imagine that you're on another planet, and the aliens that are there, you don't understand what the social rules are, you don't understand what the body language is, you don't understand, there's a whole bunch of knowledge that you don't have about how things work here, but you know that you have things that are happening internally. You need to go to the bathroom, you need to eat, you need a blanket, or it's too hot for you and you need to cool off, you need to wash, you feel uncomfortable, you want to communicate this to them, but you have no language and you have no context of what's happening in this universe. What kind of behavior do you engage in to get your needs met? Right? I don't know about you, but if you stuck me in a too hot room, you know, and with no bathroom and no way to communicate and there's no water, I would start throwing a hissy fit. I would start yelling and screaming, and you know, if somebody came into the room, I would try to get their attention, but if I wasn't, the more uncomfortable I got, the more I would ramp it up, and I would get to the point, I'm a nonviolent person, but I can see myself where I would be capable of becoming violent, because I would get to desperation, right? And for our kids, that's largely the world that they live in. If they don't understand what we're saying to them, and they don't understand the gestures that we're making, and there's lights flickering, and they're uncomfortable, and they have stuff that they're feeling that they don't have a context to put it in. You know, when you're feeling something and you don't know what it is in the moment, it's nerve-wracking. You know, if you've seen any of those stories of the women who didn't know that they were pregnant and they go into labor pains, they go to the emergency room thinking that they're dying. Now, when a woman who knows she's going into labor does not have that fear attached to it, right? But if you didn't know what was happening, you would think that you were dying. Well, for our kids, there's that immediacy of, I don't know that this feeling is ever going to end. I know that I'm uncomfortable, and it is of paramount importance that this uncomfortable stop, and I don't know how to stop it. How desperate do they become? So giving our children functional communication skills so that they can get the very rudimentary stuff communicated to us is a gift to them, and it's a gift to us, and we will see the challenging behavior starts to diminish. So don't feel, if somebody's talking to you about PECS or some other way for your child, functional communication skills, don't buy into this emotional thing of we're giving up. In fact, the studies show quite the opposite. If you start with functional communication, you're going to get to the other stuff that much faster, because the child is going to be able to calm down and learn. You know, if we were in that alien situation and the alien came in and taught us the way to ask for water, right? How much better would we be, and how much more willing if we knew, okay, if I, you know, make this symbol, the alien symbol for water, I'm making it up. If I did that, every time I did that, they gave me water, then I would be thinking to myself, all right, what's the alien symbol for I have to go to the bathroom, right? And I would be that much more excited to learn things, because I would see, okay, I don't have to fling myself sideways here to get what I want. I think our kids are largely the same way. And some of them, it's harder to get to that point, but let's think about Helen Keller. I mean, how many times did Annie Sullivan have to sit there and make the shapes of things in her hand before she finally got the first word, and then the second word, and then the third word, and then, you know, once Helen Keller got it, boy, she learned at a very rapid rate. This can be our children too, and our children have a bit of an advantage, right? Okay, so Andy Bondi and PECS, just, you gotta love him. What a wonderful, wonderful gentleman he is. All right, we're gonna take a little bit of a break, and we're gonna come back and talk more about challenging behavior and take it apart from an ABA standpoint. How do we look at challenging behavior, understand that it's communication? What kinds of things do we have in our arsenal, in our tool belt, that we can use to target challenging behavior in a way that we can change things? Stick with us.
Today has partnered with Cox Communications to bring Inclusion Films to San Diego. Led by Joey Travolta, Inclusion Films teaches filmmaking to developmentally disabled children.
It's a practical film camp where we take them through the process of making a film. And each group, we split them into 3 groups, and they're each responsible for making a short film together as a group. How many people like animation in this group?
This is a wonderful opportunity for children to build their self-confidence, to develop new friendships, and it's also an opportunity for their siblings to come and to enjoy the company of other peers in this really wonderful, fun setting.
Okay, so you know what time it is?
Cox Communications has years of supporting the community. We believe in giving back to the communities we serve, and military, youth, and education are our three pillars. And so this really matched up with everything that we're about and what we're trying to do to give back to the San Diego community. And so we were thrilled to meet up with ACT Today and Inclusion Films and to have this wonderful synergy. Three organizations really trying to move towards a common cause.
Are we ready? There you go, got it. Mark. Okay, you'll be talking to me, okay? So tell me your name, say my name is. In the past, we've done The Junior Apprentice, which was a takeoff on The Apprentice, The Really, Really, Really Late Show, which is a takeoff on The Tonight Show. And this year, we're doing a combination of 60 Minutes and Entertainment Tonight called 30 Minutes Tonight.
Okay, good. So now you understand what an improv is. You guys get the idea what an improv is? To go with the flow of something, especially in the action.
My son Elijah, he's into movies and he's into music, and so this program might bring out his particular skills.
Amazing. You're like a professional animator.
Every single person here we've met has been so kind, loving, and caring. They've given Nicholas the opportunity to be himself and be around people who have the same passion and interest as he does.
What is it you learned at filming? What did you learn?
That filming is kind of tricky.
It was really nice to know how much they were enjoying this camp, and they're with people who are supporting them and are making them feel great about themselves and their differences and their similarities. And I get two kids that are working together and apart and together and apart, so it's an interrelationship as well as a camp and a learning experience.
Everything that goes into the process of making a film goes into everyday life. So they're learning life skills, they're learning to collaborate. And when they collaborate, they come up with a product that everybody can see. They're a part of something. They become a community, they become a family. When you make a film, you really become a family.
Are we having fun at film camp? Yeah! We are close to Hollywood. Yep. And Hollywood is always looking for young talent.
Autism is an epidemic, and it's not going to get any better anytime soon. Families are struggling to pay the bills, to put food on their table, let alone provide services for their children. And ACT Today is a vehicle of support for these families by helping them get access to life supports that they couldn't otherwise have.
My experience in film camp has been great, and I just really love how all you guys decided to bring us together.
What I learned here, I learned to animate, how to operate the platform. I learned about the animation and filming and editing.
Making friends.
Making new friends and acting.
Meeting new friends. You can be anything you want to be.
You know, I was trying not to watch the whole thing because we showed this the other day, and I started to cry, and just right there at the end, you know, all those kids saying meeting new friends, and the one saying that I can do whatever I want to do. It just, takes it right out of me. But how wonderful. We had just been talking about Joey Travolta and Inclusion Films and what he does with these kids. It's just amazing, and he has a whole program for older kids too. This is for the younger kids. And this particular program that was done this summer with Autism Care and Treatment Today, this particular camp was just for kids who were in the military and their siblings. And I have to say, you know, you see those images and you see how happy and joyous our kids can be when given a chance. And in a world with so many other things going on, to know that there are these kinds of things going on, and even if you're sitting someplace and you're saying, yeah, but I don't have that here, make sure you don't first before you say that, because Joey Travolta tours and does this in the United States and in Canada, and I think he has 5 different camps this summer, so that he's done in different places. And you know what? Next summer he's going to find places to go, and if you want it where you are, ask for it, because that's what it takes sometimes, is asking for it and saying, hey, have you ever considered coming here? He's an amazing man, and he's doing some amazing stuff. And but also there are other things as well. You know, there are things happening in the world, and when we hook ourselves up to it and are willing to see what's there, it's amazing. I know sometimes I can get focused in comments like Joe Scarborough's, and I just go down the rabbit hole. But you don't have to. You can see things like that and know that there are places in this world where people get it, how our kids are worth the consideration and the care and the services and the time and the patience and the funding and the support. They are absolutely worth it. And I also want to make sure that you know, too, that when we had Joey Travolta here, and he was talking about, you know, both his camp program and the more extensive program that he does for older kids. And initially, you know, and I certainly have heard of inclusion films before, and I had an assumption. You know how we all walk around with our assumptions? And my assumption was that it was only for kids who are high functioning. Yes, that would be incorrect. And Joey Travolta said, oh, no, 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 no. You know, we sometimes have kids who are very profoundly affected, and sometimes they have to come with an aid, but that we, you know, we work with kids all over the spectrum. Just gotta love that man. He's really an incredible person. He sat here and talked with us, and at one point I said, you're the real deal, aren't you? And, you know, I just like, you know, sometimes you say something, you go, where did that come from? But I said, my goodness, you are the real deal, aren't you? And it was just, I loved his response because he said, yes, I am. And there was no hesitation that he knows it. I had to say, I love that. So check out inclusion films and see if there's something coming near you, or if you can get them near you, or if there's a similar kind of program, or maybe your child isn't so much interested in film, but there are other things, or create it. Or create it. You can. We talked to Deborah Husseini this week, and she was saying my son was an artist. So I needed for him to have a way in a community, and so she created the Art of Autism. A mom who was not an artist, who did not have an art background, and she created this thing that now so many of these young people and adults are able to get their art seen by the world. You can do it if you want to. So don't just sit there and go, we just don't have access to that. And you don't have to start something huge today, but you can start something little. Whether it's a small support group, you know, follow your passion. Find where this journey is going to take you. Nancy Elspaw Jackson always joins us on Wednesdays, and she says, you know, this is a life changer in a lot of different ways. But you know what? A lot of people find that they find their true passion. We had Sean Colton on, who said, you know, I was always somebody who wanted to write, but I didn't find my voice until my child didn't have one. You know? And now he's writing a children's book that we're going to see in December. And while none of us would have picked this, right? We just wouldn't have. But once you get here and you make peace with it and go, all right, what am I going to do while I'm here? It's amazing some of the things that you discover. So don't think that this is it, right? There's some interesting things that happen on this journey. All right, I gotta suck it up and get it together, right? Too emotional. Okay, let's talk about challenging behavior, because this is something that affects us all at some point, right? I think whether you have a child on the spectrum or not, at some point you're going to meet with challenging behavior. I just was watching an interview the other day that there's a new book out that's called My Kids Are Driving Me Crazy. And it was a gentleman talking about some different tactics you can take, and I found it very interesting because some of it I really agreed with and seemed very ABA-based. But I want to get the book. I want to see the whole thing and understand it. It was just a brief interview that I came in the middle of. But and it was not for people who have kids on the spectrum, but all kids are going to engage in challenging behavior. So first of all, to know, when you're looking at your children and they've got some challenging behavior, to not start into the self-recrimination of, this is my fault, I'm inept, I don't know what I'm doing, I've caused this, to let all that go. No matter what happens, if you have a child, at some point they're going to engage in challenging behavior. There is no such thing as the perfect child. And you know, quite honestly, I know people who have children who are very well behaved and very centered, and then they get to challenging behavior and go, I don't know what happened. It's going to happen. because it's part of development. We talk about the terrible twos, and when you really look at the terrible twos, baby comes out, it cries, you put the bottle in. Baby cries, you change the diaper. Baby cries, you find a way to meet its needs. And then we have this expectation that somewhere around 2, the child's just going to stop behaving in that, even though it's worked for them for 2 years. I cry, you do something for me. And suddenly they're 2 and we're like, why are you whining? Gee, I don't know. 'Cause it works. That's why. And it has worked for 2 years. When did your rules change, right? But we have an expectation that if the child acquires language, that they're going to start to say, I want a cookie, instead of going and throwing themselves on the kitchen floor. Well, okay, except that it takes the child a while to transition to that. And what happens when the child doesn't acquire language in a typical fashion? What are you going to do then? And what a lot of us do is throw our hands up and go, somebody help me. Somebody help me. I'm stuck in a horrible, horrible place with a child that I don't understand, that doesn't understand me, and that is acting out, and I don't know how much longer I can do it, right? Isn't that the truth? That's certainly where I was. And if you're there today, I'm glad you're here with us. This was meant to be. So let's talk about the fact that all behavior is communication. Your child is trying to tell you something, and you need to start to get in the mindset of trying to figure it out. What is your child trying to tell you? And in all likelihood, if you've got a child on the spectrum, you're going to need some professional help to be able to figure that out. That does not make you a bad parent. That doesn't make you wrong. It just means that this is a little bit harder and you need some help and support. You are not alone in that. I needed help and support, and I was a teacher who specialized in working with kids who were difficult, and I couldn't do it with my own kid. And if you don't think that I felt really bad about that and that I was inadequate, guess again, I did. But I now understand, what I didn't know. And not only that, I have a relationship with him. I'm not able to see everything because I'm a little too close to it, right? I can see things in somebody else's child that I cannot see in my child because I'm emotionally invested, and I'm busy thinking about what happened last Tuesday and not what's happening right now. Okay, having said all that, really want to encourage you to get some extra help, a BCBA, a board certified behavior analyst, to help you look at your child's behavior and determine what the communication is that's happening. Because the one thing that we know, and that science has shown time and time again, is that we don't engage in any behavior over and over and over again unless there is some sort of payoff. Right? We hear Dr. Phil saying all the time on his show, somebody's doing something, and he sits down with the family and he says to the person who's engaging in the behavior, who, by the way, doesn't usually have autism. This is not just autism, right? But it is true of autism as well. Sometimes you look at your child's behavior and you say, well, that's just off the wall, and I don't know why that's happening. I guarantee you that there is a payoff for the child if it's happening on a regular basis. But back to Dr. Phil, he says to the person, well, why are you doing this? I don't know, and I know it's messing up my life, and I'm, everybody's mad at me, and my life is just going down the toilet. I don't know. And Dr. Phil says, well, if you did know, what would it be, right? I don't know. And what Dr. Phil does, watch Dr. Phil, it's ABA, and he says, okay, but we know you're getting some sort of payoff. What's your paycheck for doing that? What are you getting as a result of that? And then the person starts to think through, and then, somebody in the family goes, oh, well, when this happens, this happens. And Dr. Phil goes, oh, well, let's change that, right? ABA. That's pure ABA, folks. What we look at all the time is that for every behavior that happens, there's a 3-term contingent, right? That's what they call it, the 3-term contingent. I call it the ABCs of behavior, because that's the easy way for me to remember that. A lot of times we look at stuff and we're caught up in the behavior, right? Because that's the thing that's jacking us up. But we need to start to look at behavior as bigger than just the behavior, this 3-term contingent, the ABC. So what's the A? A stands for antecedent. It's what happened right before the behavior, because something happened before the behavior. I know sometimes it seems like stuff just comes out of thin air and you go, everything was fine, and then they just lost it. And I don't know why, but I guarantee you that there is a reason why. And Emily's got the ABC up there. So the first thing is the A, the antecedent. The B is the behavior. What the behavior is, what it looks like, how long does it take. You know, the experts call it the topography of the behavior. What does it look like? We can just say the behavior. What is it? What did they do? They kicked, they screamed, they threw themselves, they jumped out of the shopping cart, you know, they bit people, you know, what is it? And we've all been somewhere in there, right? But there is always a consequence. It's what happens after the behavior. There's always a consequence. Behavior never happens in a void. Something happens as a result. And you don't have to take my word for this, but this is something that has been researched for more than 100 years. And it applies to absolutely all of us. Anything that we do time and time and time again, there is some sort of payoff. Now, a lot of times the payoff is not visible to us. We're not seeing it, but there is a payoff. And we know this, science has shown this again and again and again. Now, for us as parents, we want to control the behavior, right? I want to know that I can go to the grocery store and my child's not going to have a tantrum, that I'm not going to be bit, that I'm not going to be hit in the head, that my child's not going to jump out of the cart, not going to tip the cart over. And I mention all of those things because those happened on my journey through autism. Right? And I really wanted to be able to go to the grocery store and buy a can of soup and not have that pit in my stomach, because he wouldn't do it every time. Let's be honest about that. My son would do it some of the time, which was almost worse. If I had known that it was going to happen every time, I could plan for it accordingly and would know, you know, what baggage to pack. But it might happen on Tuesday and then it didn't happen on Thursday. So I'd always go into the grocery store and go, please God, let us get through this and not have this turn into an event. Right? And it was hard. It was really, really hard. And I would always want to control the behavior. I go, oh, if I just could fix this behavior and not have the tantrum happen, da-da-da-da-da. Well, we don't have a whole lot of control over the behavior. What are you going to do physically? And I used to say that to people. What am I going to do physically? You know, I gotten to the point where when he was 4, I almost couldn't pick him up. He was that big. And I have that bad of a back. What was I going to do when he was 15? I'm going to be carrying him out of the grocery store. I'm going to call the police. What's going to happen, right? All this anxiety because I wanted to control the behavior. Except the reality is that we don't have a lot of control over the behavior. I mean, physically, what are you going to do, right? Anybody who has been in a classroom and stood up in front of a group of kids who are 30 kids and you have an understanding, right? You're 1 against 30 and you can't physically control them, right? You have to have control in other ways. So if we're not trying to actually physically control the behavior, what can we do to change the behavior? Well, we do have, a lot of control over the antecedent, what happens before. And we really have a lot of control over consequences. Maybe not entirely, but we have a lot of control over those two things. So we start to look at behavior and we start to take some data down. And I always talk about this, that you take a piece of paper and you draw 2 lines down the paper, so you got 3 columns. And you can label them A, B, and C. A is the hardest one because antecedent, let's face it, it's not a term that we walk around before autism and say on a regular basis. Make friends with it, antecedent. It helps you to remember A, B, C. Otherwise, I would just say to you, what happens before? But that doesn't fit in with A, B, C, right? That's a W. So make friends with the jargon. A, B, C. And the behavior happens and you're there and you don't have time to take notes right then, right? But I do think that part of what happens when the behavior happens is that we have a reaction, right? We don't even know it. Child's engaging in a behavior and we're already into consequence because we're, don't do that, stop it right now, right? That's all consequence, right? So instead of that, we want to stop our emotional response first. And I think that one of the things that we can do for ourselves in that moment when the child is engaging in challenging behavior is to kind of go through a checklist for ourselves and start by saying to ourselves, is my child in any danger right now? If they are, change the circumstances. Like, do I need to move them out of the way of things? I kind of treat it like a seizure. And I know some of you have kids who have seizures. What do you do when your child's having a seizure? You don't immediately try to stop the seizure, right? Because you can't. But you move furniture and people away so that they can't be hurt and your child can't be hurt. You try to secure the immediate environment for safety, right? And then you kind of have to wait it out. And that's exactly what you want to do when somebody's engaging in challenging behavior. Clear the area, but there's no, what, in the middle of a seizure, are you going to start talking to the child about, I wish you wouldn't do this? Or, no, right? Same thing during challenging behavior. This is not the time when we talk about, now look, you know, when we go to, no. Just try not to give it any more fuel. You wouldn't want to make the seizure worse, right? If you know that there's something that triggers your child into a seizure, you're not going to engage in that right when the child's having the seizure, right? It's a time to, but you will be watching them closely when they're having the seizure to make sure that they're not swallowing their tongue and that they're not getting into danger and stopping breathing and all of those things. I think the same thing can be said for a child who's having a tantrum. Clear the area, step back, and take a look at the behavior. What is happening? Don't give it a whole lot of attention, right? So we're not staring at the child, but you're taking note and going, all right, the child's having a behavior. What does it look like? Are they on the floor? Are they kicking? Are they biting? Are they screaming? Are they crying? Are they grabbing a part of their body? What are they doing? Look at it dispassionately like a clinician. And I know the first time that I ever saw a therapist watching my child have a tantrum, it was an education, because they were completely passive and just standing there watching it, looking at it, seeing what it is. What is it? What does it look like? And so much of the time we're so emotionally involved, we don't. You're going to take notes on this later, not in the moment, but make sure that you're going to take accurate notes. So how long is it going on? It's just like, you can even count in your head once you've secured the area. 100, 2 100. How long does the tantrum go on? It seems like an eternity. And if you're not doing anything to give it more gas, you're going to see that it peters out, right? Okay, tantrum is over. Now start to notice what happens immediately afterwards. Now, does the child get up and say, okay, great, so now can I have whatever the thing was that I wanted? What happens right afterward? How does everybody else react? How do you react? What happens afterwards? That's the consequence. Do you pick your child up afterwards and hug them and say, are you calm now? Mom loves you. That's what I used to do. That's exactly what I used to do, is love my child and hug him and rub his head and rock him and sing him to sleep. And I couldn't understand why my child was still engaging in challenging behavior. He loved that. He loved to be rocked. He got my attention. He got to be on my lap and I would soothe him. And it was this lovely bonding moment where I was feeding the tantrum. I was making sure that there was a great paycheck. Did I mean to do that? No. Does that make me a horrible parent? No. But did I need to stop doing that to stop the tantrums and find other moments to soothe him and love him and rock him? And did I need to teach him the functional communication skills to say, I want some attention, I'm tired, could you rock me, would you sing to me? Yes. Did we do all of that? Yes. Did his tantrum stop? Yes. Did they move into other tantrums? Yes. Did we then look at those things and figure out what the paycheck was and amend it? Yes. I mean, it sounds ridiculous. We're running out of time, but I want to go through what the 4 most common reasons are for challenging behavior, because it is almost always one of these 4 things. So some of the work is done for you that it's one of these usual suspects, although sometimes it can be a combo platter, right? Okay, so the 4 most common reasons why somebody engages in challenging behavior is for attention. That's number 1, right? And remember that it can be positive attention, negative attention. And we see this not just with kids with autism, we see this with adults in real life, right? There are people that we know that just need a whole lot of attention, and it doesn't matter to them whether it's negative. It's really scary when people are so desperate for attention that they'll take negative attention, right? It's not the circumstance that we want to be in. And our children will tantrum and engage in challenging behavior in order to get our attention. And when we scold them, we paid them off. Here's your paycheck. You got my attention now. In that case, when it's attention, and we know that it's attention, we never want to be in a circumstance where we're ignoring our child, but we want to teach them functional communication skills so they can appropriately ask for attention, and then we have to be mindful to give it to them when they ask for it appropriately, even if it's in the middle of cooking dinner. You turn off the burner, set everything to the side, and you give them the attention, right? Sometimes that's hard, but that's what ends up making the difference. And we don't give negative attention, and we don't give positive attention, but we don't ignore. We stay mindful, we stay in the room, we just don't give it gas. We don't give it the attention, and we ask for other people. You know, if Aunt Shirley is there and the child is tantruming and Aunt Shirley says, oh honey, you know, don't tantrum now, you know, be a happy, nice child. And you have to go to Aunt Shirley and say, you know what, when he behaves like this, I need for you to start humming the Star Spangled Banner in your head while you're doing a close inspection of your palm, because he wants to get attention or she wants to get attention. And sometimes Aunt Shirley is not going to be cooperative, right? That's when you got a problem. But there are ways around that as well. Saying to her, well, you know, then come back some other time when we've moved past this, right? Or distract Aunt Shirley in the moment and say, hey, can I talk to you about this and so over here? Honey, take her in the kitchen and talk to her about that. Just remove them from the circumstances when you can. It's really hard when it's other kids, right? But you can distract them as well. The art of distraction. But don't leave the child alone ever. We never ignore a child, but we do ignore behavior. A lot, if the function of the behavior is attention. Sometimes, I said the four main suspects, sometimes it's access to an object. So if you're looking at your antecedent and what happened was that there were cookies, the child didn't get one, and the child threw the tantrum, it may be, and of course with all of these things, you never want to try to figure out the function yourself, especially when it's challenging behavior. Get a BCBA to look at it, right? And I'll tell you a story why in a moment. But if the function of the behavior is access to a tangible or to a person, they want to access to dad, or they want access to mom, or they want access to a toy, they're going to engage in the challenging behavior. Again, we always want to do a replacement behavior because this is a simple solved thing if we teach this child the functional communications to be able to appropriately ask for access to the toy or mom or dad or whatever it is, right? But we never, ever, if they've engaged in the challenging behavior, want the consequence to be that they got it. How many times have we been in line at the grocery store and the child wants the candy that's right there by the register? It's the walk of death, the register for a lot of people. The child engages in the challenging behavior and starts to tantrum, and the parent who's so flustered says, here, just have it, right? And sometimes we all do that. I have done that before just to get the challenging behavior to stop. But you know what we're doing? We're shooting ourselves in the foot because what we just did was gave the paycheck. So is that behavior going to go up or down? Oh, guess with me. There's going to be more of that behavior because the child went, well, it worked. It worked, so why wouldn't I do it again? So we never want to give the reward when it's access to someone or something for the challenging behavior. We can work it out so that we give the skills over a period of time to appropriately ask for it, and then we want to give it when they appropriately ask. But if they engage in the challenging behavior, we want there to at least be a period of time before after the child calms down, before we will give them access to it, right? Another one of the reasons why children engage in challenging behavior is to escape someone or something. So the child does not like to take baths, is terrified of the bath, does not like the whole bubble bath, and doesn't like the toys. The child will do anything to escape it, and keep in mind with this one that getting 30 seconds or 3 seconds before they have to do it is enough of escape. If there's any kind of, I postponed that, even for a millisecond, it's a payoff. It's a paycheck. I used to see this with my son with homework. We would sit down and do homework, and we would get challenging behavior city. And what we realized was that even while I was dealing with the challenging behavior, there was a 30-second gap when he got away with not doing it. So you have to devise an intervention where they can ask for a break. right? Appropriately ask for a break, and then you give it to them. That's the functional communication portion of the program. But that you also do not allow, so if the child starts to tantrum, when you put them in the bath, you still put them in the bath, right? So that it does not have the payoff for it. But if they do ask appropriately and say, can I have a minute? Can I have a half hour? You know, that they get the break. And I know people say, well, then they're not going to want to do it in a half an hour, but, you know, they do learn, I'm going to have to do it anyway, and I did get the break. They do learn to set down and get to it. They really do. It is amazing, whether it's the bath or the homework or whatever. Okay, the last one of the 4 most common suspects is the hardest one. It's when something is automatically reinforcing, that there's something about the act of it that is in some way soothing or pleasurable or stimulating. There's something about it that is internal and works. What we see with a lot of the repetitive and restrictive behaviors is this is the case. It's hard because we're never going to know what part of it is actually reinforcing, like the hand flapping, like the toe walking, like, you know, sometimes biting fits into this category, that it just feels good on the gums itch. There are all kinds of behaviors that can be automatically reinforcing. That's the toughest one to solve because it's really hard to find the perfect replacement. But you try a bunch of things. You can try something that's a competing behavior, that they can't engage in the one behavior while they're engaging in the other one, and you make sure that what the competing one is very reinforcing to them to get them away from the other behavior. It's the hardest one, but we do know that we can make a difference and diminish those behaviors even though they're automatically reinforcing. Now, I mentioned before that it's not okay to guess yourself, and I always like to use the example of when your car breaks down, you have an idea of what it is, like you know there's only a certain number of things that it can be. You go, oh, I think it's the starter, right? And it might very well be the starter, but would you ever take the starter out yourself and put a new starter in just on your gut feeling on it? And you know, I appreciate parents' gut feelings, and I think when you go to the mechanic, you say to them, I think it's the starter, and the mechanic's going to start looking at things and take into consideration that you think it's the starter. You're in the car more than they are. They're going to listen to you, right? They should. But a lot of times they're going to come back and go, no, it's not the starter, it's the ignition. And you go, really? I know, starter, ignition, same thing. They might say it's the alternator, whatever it is. And you saved money and you saved time and you actually got the car fixed. Same things with our kids. Consult with a BCBA. Get the behavior turned around. If you try to implement an intervention with the function that you think it is and it's not, you run the risk of putting your child in danger. Don't do it. Consult with a BCBA, a board-certified behavior analyst. Hey, we're at the end of our time, but even as this show ends, the conversation continues. There's so much more to talk about our kids and how we can be more efficient, more effective. So please be a part of the conversation over the weekend. Emily's going to start to show you some of the ways that you can participate. There's email, there's phoning, there's Skyping. You can friend us on Skype over the weekend because you know you want to Skype in on Monday. You can talk to us on Facebook. We have our Autism Live page, but I also personally am on Facebook, Shannon Penrod, and you can friend me on Facebook. You can tweet with me or with Autism Live on, you'll see that we're Autism Live Show on Twitter, and I am Jem's Mama on Twitter. That's who I am on Twitter. There are lots of ways that you can continue to watch the show. If you're one of the new viewers that's joined us this week and you're watching us on Autism Live, the Autism-Live, that's wonderful, but you can also be watching us on blip.tv, catch up on some old episodes. You can be watching us on YouTube, you can download us for free on iTunes, and you can also be watching us on Ustream. So there's all those different ways that you can be watching us. We have a lot of information for you. We've interviewed a lot of experts. We have a lot more coming up. So many things to talk about. You know, from time to time people ask me what I do, and I say I talk for 3 hours. Like 5 days a week, and they go, no way. About autism, there's not enough to talk about. I go, trust me, there's enough to talk about and more. We never have enough time. So we've got a lot of really exciting interviews coming up in the coming weeks, but as always, we're here to serve you. So what do you need? What are you interested in? What do you want to see more of? You want to see more nuts and bolts, or do you like the more hopeful, you know, and be able to talk to people? Let us know. Participate in the conversation because we are listening to you. We're going to be back back on Monday, and as I said, we got a bunch of really exciting things coming up for you that I'm really excited about. I hope that this weekend there's exciting stuff going on. You've got all those insurance free seminars that you can go to. You can watch that runner tomorrow in the 400 meter, and Mars rover Curiosity is landing on Sunday. Until Monday, please give your kiddos a hug from me. Bye-bye for now.